Technical difficulties and all. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on with us. After much battling, we have you, and you're in the future actually. Since what is it, like 9 o'clock in the morning there, or 10 o'clock, or 11 o'clock in the morning actually?
11 a.m.
Very nice, very nice. Well, as I said, we are Tower Dive. I'm Captain Hooks. He is Pan the Man, and let's get right.
I mean, to be fair, I'm always in the future since I'm from Europe anyway.
Oh,
So
Good point.
just
Good point.
remember that Europe is factually always ahead of North America. God made it that way, apparently. So,
So what's the future's like? I mean, let us, you gotta let us know when they get the flying cars going on here, because that's frankly all we care about, is getting places faster like that.
Well, that's actually, if you think about it, the way Americans perceive the world. So even in the future, when you have fabulous technology that can create anti-gravity, you still imagine a world in which you need like fossil fuels and stuff to like travel.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's
yeah.
still just a car. It's just a car. That you haven't even solved the basic problem that was there already in the motor vehicle industry. It's just a car that flies. Like, okay.
With as much gas as possible.
Listen,
Probably needs some sort of futuristic like hydroplasma that still has to be mined out of some country somewhere.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's the American way, isn't it? I mean, let's really just face facts here. So how you doing? How's everything going with you? You're living in
right.
you're living in Korea. That's, like I said, that's kind of awesome. I mean, I wish my life allowed me to do like cool stuff like that. Instead, I'm here in pristine New Jersey.
Well, you too could work for like $7,000 a year for half a decade, and you might get there too, buddy. So if you think the payoff's worth it, for that gold watch, you survive top shootouts is worth it, then you too could live in Korea occasionally.
I just think, like I said, I just find it to be incredibly cool. I admire what you guys do because, number one, like you said, you're all you guys. I mean, we had Richard Lewis on. You listened to that show. You guys get to see and do a lot of crazy, like, awesome, see things that most of us in the like, I don't want to call it the normal, the normal person's world, but the I guess. I don't know how to refer to it because I don't want to say glamorous because I know it's not. I know you guys bust your asses, covering these things and going out and finding these stories and, reporting it to people like us who, sit like trolls on Reddit, waiting for you guys to post, something that we can, rant on and be like, oh my God, Thorin just said this, or oh my God, Richard Lewis did this, except we can't say it on Reddit because they don't like him. But ultimately, I mean, essentially, what you guys do as followers of eSports and followers of whatever game, be it League of Legends, be it Counter-Strike, be it StarCraft, anything, we're hanging on your guys' words. So I find that cool, especially, we run our podcast, and then the 13 people sometimes that we get to catch.
Hey,
It's
25.
Hey, listen.
Huge.
When
dedicated fans.
it's a grassroots group.
Dedicated.
But it's and like I said, I mean, that we envy you for that, for you guys going out there and doing that kind of work, because essentially either we can't or we're just incapable of doing stuff like that. So thank you.
Fair enough.
So let's start off with some super hard-hitting questions, right? Are you as pissed off about the Gangplank voiceovers as the rest of the world seems to be? I mean,
I'm pissed off
come
that
on.
like voiceovers even exist in games and different skins exist in games and that lore exists in games and that people care about the lore in games and people discuss the lore in games, that people actually think about storylines that aren't even well-written story. People actually have arguments speculating on the next storyline gap in a world which isn't even original ideas. These are like third-rate rip-offs of every anime, every like steampunk sci-fi, like the most low-level writing of like even the worst RPG ever written would never make it with this backstory. And people actually care about this, and they're like, I've heard that actually maybe Zed could be like Nocturne's brother, but what maybe happened was like Soraka was interacting. It's like, that's like the terrible flavor text to a game in which you don't even roleplay those characters. You just play it yourself, and you use those characters in totally different roles to kill people. Like, So it doesn't even interact with my brain. So the fact that that even exists as a question, yes, pisses me off, but not for the reason you probably imagined.
I'm in the boat of I could care less about lore in a MOBA when I'm rolling down lane, getting my butt pushed in by Callista. I'm not thinking, man, like she could have, she died. That's crazy. Like her story is, I'm thinking, what the fuck,
Son of a bitch.
That's why I can't believe the people who actually like say they complain about not enough lore. Like, when are we going to find out what happened to this character? Like, his city was ruined, and like, how is he still able? Like, who even gives a fuck, mate? Why are you even reading that?
Yeah, when's League story mode? What?
You will die before you read all of the classics, watch all of the great movies. You are obsessing over the lore in a game which actually, remember, here's the worst thing about League of Legends. It's not even a downloadable game. Like, if League of Legends goes bust and they cancel the game in 5 years, you won't even be able to play it anymore or ever access the gaming. It's not like Fallout 1 where you can go back and play it again. So this is actually, listen, there's that saying that like time wasted doing something you enjoy isn't really time wasted, but that's it. You're not getting anything extra out of it beyond the very simple tick of your brain just going over to the next cycle when you do lore stuff, I think.
Who is
it's kind of base.
Daughter? I have to know.
I must.
Meanwhile, there are players making millions of dollars playing this game professionally, but really, who is Cassidy's daughter? We gotta find out. The hard-hitting questions here on Tower Dive.
No, I know. I mean, listen, that's decent. We tackle the big subjects. Well, let's get into actual real. Let's get something beyond just lore.
Meaningful content, maybe.
Something legit.
Yeah.
So, from what I know, I mean, you as far as Europeans go, you fancy yourself a bit of a C9 fan. I know you thought somewhat highly of Meteos as a jungler. The whole situation with C9, kind of what's happened to them right now, and it's I mean, it's a great organization. It's a team that's in ruin right now that really no one knows what to do to kind of fix them. Now with, that kind of ties into the whole Unicorns of Love thing, where you have Kikis leaving a team that was essentially doing pretty good, wasn't great, but he wants to be the shot caller. Now, obviously, that brought the rumors that C9 is talking to Kikis, and he wants to be a shot caller, and it's a perfect marriage because they need a jungler, they need a shot caller, he wants to be a shot caller, and it just makes sense. What do you make of all of this? What is your kind of what's your take on this whole thing? Because it just comes across really, I mean, it makes sense in one hand, but on the other hand, I can't see it happening. But who am I? So
I don't listen. At this point, they probably have to gamble on something. There is that aspect where obviously this lineup does not work. Like, there's no possible external reasons outside of the server that you need to look at to know that this lineup cannot exist and ever be a top team in North America. Like, one of the things people make the mistake of is knowing details that are like circumstantial, like how players get on in a relationship or something extra, like this player hasn't been there for that long and all the rest of it. Go throughout the history of any esports game and look at teams that are successful, and overwhelmingly, I'd say almost 100%, all of them turn out to be almost as good as they're going to be very early on in their lifespan. Like, the 5-man lineup that becomes the great team or does very well is good pretty much early on. Like, yeah, they might lose a couple of games to start with, but they're going to be at like a 67% win rate within the first 5 or 6 games. If you ever find an instance where that didn't happen, check the roster and you'll find out they made a roster move in the meantime. All the most successful teams, the natural synergy has to be there, like a baseline initially. Sure. That obviously isn't there at all in C9. Then, once you have the basic synergy, then you can maybe build up some others. So, for example, like the interaction of 2 specific players as they get to know each other. But if you don't have that baseline, I don't think you can ever be a really good team. Like, to me, stuff like working together and practicing and working on comms and even adding in tactics is, to a degree, an artificial way of trying to replicate what great teams have anyway. Mm-hmm. Like in Counter-Strike, for example, which is a very team play focused game, the best team in the world at the moment, well, what's amazing is that some of the last events that ESL have run, they've actually released these streams, VODs, where you can hear the comms of the teams, and people have even subtitled them. So the best team is a Swedish team at the moment. And when you hear these guys' comms, it is so minimal, you wouldn't believe they could be making the plays they're making. And here's the thing, it's not that they're making those plays like they're just geniuses and they just know what's going to happen now. It's that the base level of chemistry between these players, as in they're just the right sort of players who should be playing with each other in the right positions, is so good that, first of all, what they naturally would do anyway has a high likelihood of working. Like, as in, if you just make whatever play you're going to make and I see what you're doing and I instinctively think, right, well, I should back him up in this way, or I should follow up this way, it just works. There's that level. And then secondly, because they're so high level, even the basics of communication they have worked on has just become a kind of shorthand. It's like a macro on a computer, okay? It's programmed so that if I say something very simple, you instantly know, like, the implications of that 3 or 4 levels down, what we're going to do in a second. So I think it's actually like that with all teamwork. Like, in most cases, you can never build like a genius roster that just perfectly fits. Like maybe the old Cloud9 roster, like Gambit Gaming, like Moscow 5, these teams that just instinctively had this insane teamwork. But I think the normal process of practicing is artificially trying to replicate that to get as close as you can, where, say, you and I don't actually, say we both play well in the game, but our actual synergy isn't that great. Okay, we can kind of bridge the gap a little bit by, if I tell you, like, okay, if I say this, it means this, like, update your internal dictionary, you know. If I make a specific shot call, it'll take away a scenario where naturally, left to our own devices, we'd have both done something a bit different, you know. The problem is, you can see that the point I'm trying to make here is this current Cloud9 lineup, no amount of extra practice, extra getting like bonding, all that stuff, I don't think that will actually change. I think what you see now is who the Cloud9 is going to be. So from that perspective, yeah, you have to do something, don't you? You have to try some sort of move. Is Kikis the right move? I'd probably say no, actually, because I don't think he's actually a very good player. And I actually think in a weird way that Unicorns of Love actually just brought out the best in him. As in, if you actually look at, what's funny is his statement when he's now leaving the team was about how the team was really scattered, like communication, that, you know, people had different ideas on what they were going to do. So I actually think the style of Unicorns of Love, that chaos style, was literally just a way of making it work. As in, if you all just agree, if one person goes ham, everyone will go ham. Mm-hmm. That takes away all needs for decision making. You don't need to be very shrewd. You don't have to make an extra shot call later. You're just going to keep fighting until you win the fight, or you're going to die. And that's what Unicorns of Love basically did. Then add in some weird picks, and now they could fight at times you wouldn't expect. But I can't see him going to, put it this way, if Cloud9's going to be really good, you'd think they'd have to have some shot calling. They'd have to play like a measured, objective game. They'd have to try and be one of the best teams. Otherwise, again, what have you gained? Like, if they become Unicorns of Love and they're like a 50% win rate, I don't know if that's that much of an upgrade now. You're supposed to be going for broke if you're Cloud9, to me.
Yeah, no, I agree completely, and I actually didn't think of it that way. And I mean, I don't know, even if you say, fine, you know, take all of that out and say, okay, he's a great player and you're putting him on, I don't even think his style of play even fits with what they're even attempting to do, like, as a team. Because, like you said, you know, he has kind of a bizarre, you know, his champion pool, like, everyone, you know, lauds him on how you know, he plays such off-meta picks, and it's just, you know, I don't know how great that always is. I remember when everyone was first talking about Unicorns of Love and how all of their picks were so, you know, so wild and crazy, and they take teams by surprise because of that. And I was like, I don't know if that's necessarily a great thing, because if they get kind of locked into a game where they're forced to kind of play a meta, does that mean that they can't? And then bring it back to Kikis. Now you're putting him in a team that doesn't do that kind of crazy weird picks where, you know, they're not gonna, you know, back him up with crazy off meta picks, and you have a mid laner in Incarnation who has so little experience. I mean, he's learning on the go. I mean, great solo queue player, but being in solo queue and then being on stage are two completely different things. I think there's such a crazy dynamic happening within the C9 camp that you have, you know, him learning, and then if you think to bring Kikis in and that's going to fix it, I don't necessarily see that having the intended result, just like bringing Incarnation and didn't have the intended result, that he was just going to step in for High and, you know, it was going to be business as usual because High was injured and that's why he couldn't play, because he couldn't put the time into the game and the team had lost faith in him in that regard. And, you know, we'll just make Meteos the shot caller because Meteos is a great jungler and he'll be able to pick up the slack that, you know, is left with High going. And it sort of puts them in just a weird place where I don't know what would fix their situation. You know, do they blow it up like Fnatic and just kind of pick one guy and start over from there?
The big problem they have, if you think about it in terms of bringing in someone like Kikis, is whenever you talk about any, here's a key like thing to look at. Whenever someone has success with a really off-meta pick, especially if they're repeatedly doing it, look what happens when they don't use the off-meta pick. Because any all-time great player, a number of the greatest players ever were famous for innovating picks, using certain picks ahead of time, or they even take someone else's pick. So, for example, when Power of Evil, for example, who actually is a good innovator, he can do it in a way where he innovates, and then that pick sticks as well. It becomes the meta. That's the ideal way to innovate. Okay, because then you are by definition playing meta picks. You're just ahead of everyone by 2 weeks. Now, even when Power of Evil does that, okay, other people like Faker take the same pick and can do it even better. Okay. So the key thing to notice is the greatest players, and this works as a general principle, don't need the off-meta pick. That is like a little wrinkle in their game they have to have a slight competitive advantage over maybe their peer who's a very good player. The players who nearly always rely on the off-meta picks, if you think about it, they're not even relying on the champion. Because once the champion then becomes meta, if it's good, people like Kickers don't keep playing that champion. They then have to find a new thing that everyone's not playing. So actually, that is telling you that they're not very good players. Put it this way, think of the first time most people in North America saw Kickers and Unicorns of Love. It was the game they played against TSM, where he played Twisted Fate Jungle, and he flash gold carded Bjergsen, right? What a great off-pick meta, right? When's he done that again? When's he played TF again? When's he done the same sort of move again? That was actually an incredibly high risk, medium reward sort of move, actually. Like it wasn't even guaranteed when he pulled that off that he doesn't just get behind on jungle, blow his summoners, and then what? He hasn't even got the gank, hasn't even secured it. So the whole thing was based around almost like a desperation style of play. They had to go the craziest possible pick, take these crazy plays, and then gamble that from that situation, something good's going to come from it. And here's the problem. We've now got enough data on Unicorns of Love that it didn't work. Like their win rate in the regular split of the spring season was 50%.
Yeah.
Their win rate in the regular split of this season is 50%. In the playoffs, they won one series 3-1. Congrats. They then won a series in the semi-final 3-2 and lost the final 3-2. So over the semi and final, they were also 50% win rate. They are literally the most average team in terms of win rate because they try so much risky shit that it works half the time, doesn't work half the other time. That's it. And then also, unfortunately, the reason why I don't have that much of a high regard for Kickers and some of the other players is that I think the one player in their team who I don't think's that like wacky, just has to do weird stuff is actually Power of Evil. I think he's actually quite a stable player. And so I think him being the best player is like a stabilizing force that the others can do all the crazy stuff. And to a degree, he at least provides some backbone. So the problem is you take him away and you put Kickers into a different environment. I can't see how he'll thrive. Like I think you've seen the best you've seen of him. You've seen what you saw in Unicorns of Love.
No, I definitely agree with everything that you're saying. I think, I think the reason that he worked where he worked in that situation was just because that was, I don't want to call it a perfect storm because 50-50 is hardly a perfect storm, but it was, it would be weird to see how that would work because then if you say, okay, they spend the money and they throw him, and C9 brings him in, and then it goes even further south and things really start to kind of, shit really hits the fan, as it were. Well, then what? Because their first way to fix things was Incarnation, and the second way to fix things was Kickus. So then what?
Well, we know what happens with that. The team gets relegated, and then they disband, and then the really good players get picked up on other teams that make it back into the LCS, and the not-so-great players become coaches and analysts or whatever they can do to find something in the field of esports. Here's the
thing, though. I think I'm the only person who actually takes some enjoyment out of the predicament that Cloud9's in right now. I think it's great because we're going to find out so many things that you never knew about Cloud9. Yeah. So, for example, the whole basis of their team was this idea that, they did have, an amazing synergy of 5 particular players where you even saw, the carry roles shifted throughout different splits as different roles became more prevalent. Different champions fitted a certain player better. So he becomes more of the carry. Now we're switching to someone else. Meteos had to change and revise their style over and over. They always had the same shot calling no matter what the meta was, whether it was the 4v0 starts, whether it was them having to come back into games. They always could find a way with the original team to win. And so unfortunately, it worked so well. I think that was the ultimate band-aid. And so even in the last 2 splits and the last international tournaments, you saw they gradually were going downhill. They could just keep it together. They had the amazing comebacks that they could still almost make it, but it was getting less and less. They started off super dominant and they started off really good and they had all this upside. And by the end, the whole reason why everyone was in favor of high leaving, which was the correct decision, was because they would hit a ceiling that I've seen very few teams ever hit, where there was nowhere to go. Like they already were getting the best out of their style of that amazing shot calling was already at its peak.
Yeah.
Now it was really on individual skills that they could never advance beyond other teams that had comparable shot calling, but maybe much better players. So the big problem before is, unfortunately, it kind of made the job of people like Jack at Cloud9 and their coach a bit easy in a way. Because if you think about it, they're one of the few teams who could totally mess up pick ban, but win the game anyway. Most teams, if they lose the game, they can always go to I should have picked this, should have banned this, should have changed this player shouldn't play this champion. They could kind of get a band-aid at every level of the game. On the lineup, they could just change the focus of the team. On the shot calling, they could come back into a game they'd actually misplayed the first 2/3 of. On the pick ban, they could still sometimes rescue a game where they should have given it up. I mean, I remember the game where they would have gone out 3-0 to Team Liquid in the playoffs last split, when they gave up almost an entire Juggermore comp to the other team at a time when people were wrecking with this comp, but they managed to win the game because Team Liquid was indecisive and they didn't shot call well. So the problem is, we've never really got to see what is like the metal of Cloud9 in terms of like, what will they do when a lineup fails completely? What will they do when a player like Balls is underperforming on a level we've never seen before? What do they do when formerly your star player, Meteos, is having like an average season and now he's made the shot caller and now apparently the shot calling doesn't work and he's not decisive and he doesn't want to do it and people don't listen to his call? You've got all these questions that normal teams have to deal with all the time, and we criticize them really harshly when they make the wrong decisions. But now Cloud9 basically... Here's the thing, there's no easy solutions. Like, I don't think there is one player you can just insert in the team and it will fix everything. And that includes high, by the way. I don't think even if you put high mid lane, it would go back to the old days. I think those times have passed. So my big reason why I'm interested is I want to see what hard decisions does Cloud9 make. Like, what player do they go for if it's a star that they're going to gamble the bank on again? What incarnation move do they do? If they're going to go for lesser names, okay, which rising talent are they willing to put into a pressure environment like that and know he's going to make it? And then finally... I'd put it like this way. Here's why it's also really exciting. Think of all the years where people were like, oh, yeah, there's no NA talent. I mean, I guess you got Meteos, but he's always going to be on Cloud9. Sneaky's really good, but he'll always be on Cloud9. Ball's like very good at certain metas, but he'll never leave Cloud. Well, all of these players might be available soon. So forget if Cloud9 dies. Like, if Cloud9 dies, but you think all those players are going to retire? I don't think so. So that means it becomes sexy in that way, because some of those, hey, what happens if Sneaky is playing on CLG next split? What happens if Meteos is the TSM jungler, you know? It doesn't have to be a negative, even though the team itself is having issues.
Yeah. I'm, and it's also, I mean, I know a lot of people have a lot of respect for, C9 as an organization. So, I mean, even if it does kind of blow up, I feel like they would do
it's not going to be a meet or maker situation.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone's going to be parting on hopefully decent terms, and no one's
I say
that. I like to think the best of some orgs and the worst of others.
No, here's the problem.
It could be a disaster.
The org has treated them very well. From what I've heard, Cloud9 as an org is very good, but that's the problem. You would think the org being so good would kind of mitigate any possible backlash. Well, literally, something like 3 or 4 days ago, I think it was like 3 days ago, an interview came out in Counter-Strike where a former Cloud9 player who was a bit salty about how he was caught literally just dropped dime that all the players were using Adderall in an actual major tournament in CSGO. So you can't always be sure about that. Now, I doubt that would happen in League of Legends, as in even if they were, I think they've been treated so well for so many years, they probably wouldn't. But you can never mitigate the human factor like that. You never know when a loose cannon will just let off a barrage, Oh, yeah. And that's not some sort of law reference to Graves, in case you're wondering.
Nice.
I know you just posted a video on the Adderall controversy that's going on right now. Is there anything going on as far as League goes? I know what's happening in Counter-Strike, but that's also been fairly prevalent for a while. At least accusations of Adderall.
The thing is, in League, I don't know, because that's not the problem with that sort of thing is since Counter-Strike has so many LANs, you can be around players a lot more, and if you're friends with any players, you're going to get to see a lot more things. In an LCS environment, it's very rare as a journalist you're ever actually going back to people's team houses or any of that sort. You're just seeing them at the LCS studio. So unless you literally saw them doing these things at LCS studio, it's very unlikely you'd even get an insight on that. And secondly, I also just think the level is so high in terms of the scrutiny for LCS stuff that if anyone is doing it, I think they would be much, much more careful about any chance of getting caught in that particular sense,
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's why C9's failing so bad. Riot started to crack down on the drug usage, and now no one can get their fix.
Well, to be fair, if that was high on performance-enhancing drugs, like I think it's over for them if he doesn't get access. So.
Gotta get his prescription adjusted. Oh man. That's insane. Um,
Well, I mean, let's move on from the C9 thing. I mean, I'm just interested to see what's kind of going to happen. But let's flip it to kind of a little more a better situation. So, Fnatic, I've always been a big Fnatic fan.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, yeah. So I'm super excited that they're crushing right now. I mean, they look like a team. I've been following Fnatic for a long time, and this is by far the best that I've seen this team look. And no one saw it. I'm sorry, I was laughing at the chat. No one saw it coming. Specifically me. I mean, when you sat there and said, okay, well, everyone's gone. We've got Yellowstar. Okay, they handed Yellowstar the keys to the castle and were like, pick the team. So last split, they come out. They play really well. They look incredibly good. And they make the change of removing Steelback and bringing back Reckless, which, some people were like, oh my God, it's awesome. I can't wait. And other people were like, oh, I can't believe you brought him back. He left you guys high and dry. Thought it was cool because I was a big Reckless fan anyway. But now, there's other steamrolling teams in Europe. Basically, it's pretty much their games to lose. Even the games that they play bad in, they manage to come back and they look like stomps. If you didn't catch the first, 15 minutes of the game, you're like, oh, so Fnatic is stomping again. Fantastic. What do you think, what are their chances with Worlds? I mean, you're in Korea. You're seeing basically the best of the best. Does a team like Fnatic and the way that they're playing right now, I mean, do they have a legitimate chance at Worlds?
It depends what you mean. If you mean a legitimate chance to win the tournament, I still think no, unfortunately. Yeah. Here's the factor. Similar to the Unicorns of Love scenario, okay? The key thing is you can't cherry pick from results. You have to look at them as a holistic approach, okay? So at MSI, everyone will tell you proudly, wow, SK Telecom, they took them to 5 games. In the series, they were getting games where they were getting the upper hand and they were doing well. Okay, let's look at the 5-game series, first of all. Game 5 wasn't even close. They were comprehensively destroyed at every single minute of the game, but just crushed to not even have a chance to be in the game. So there's one game out of the mix immediately. We've got 4 games left. In those 4 games, yes, they had 2 games that were really good. Then they had 2 games where SK Telecom won. So, okay, fair enough. You went sort of 50-50 there. The part people forget to mention, okay, is that there wasn't only the SK Telecom series at that tournament. They lost to EDG in the group stage. They lost to AHQ in the group stage in a best of 1. So in this particular scenario, even at their best, even in this international competition, they had moments of weakness. They weren't like they are in Europe again. They weren't just bulldozering everyone. Oh, yeah. They couldn't overcome every kind of disadvantage. Now then, the big issue is, I don't think they can win the tournament because I actually think the SK Telecom series was probably a mild overperformance. I think they can definitely take a game off someone like SK Telecom, whoever the best Korean team is by Worlds rolls around. Mm-hmm. And so if you think of the normal format of Worlds, if it's the same as last year, it's 4-team groups, and the top 2 get out of there. And the format, if you remember, was that it goes based on seeding. So if we're assuming that Fnatic get the number 1 seed from Europe, which they're very likely to, then that helps them out because they now can't get the number 1 seed from China or Korea. So first of all, it gives them the best group of, well, not of every Western team because there's going to be a top NA seed, but it gives them the best possible group you can get as a Westerner. Yeah. So now, in theory, to get out of the group, they probably only have to win over one of the 2, whichever Korean team and whichever Chinese team, assuming they get the group like that. They don't get the rigged TSM group where you magically don't get a Korean. Assuming you get a Korean and a Chinese team, odds are they only have to beat one of them probably because they'll beat whoever the 4th team is to get out of the group. So odds are they're going to get out of the group, actually. I think that's all. I would bet they'd get out of the group. Now, the problem is, you have to get out in first to probably have any chance of going to the semis. Because if you get out in second, you're going to be playing a first-place team from another group, which is going to be the Chinese or the Korean team.
Yeah,
so
naturally.
Now you have to win a best of 5 just to get to the semis so that's going to be hard. If it's the other way around, listen, it's entirely possible. Some possible scenario could occur where you can get out in first place and you somehow get the weakest Korean team, weakest Chinese team, the third place one based on where they'd be in their group. That might be doable in a bit. I could see them having a 50-50 chance in that series. So I'd say best case scenario, semifinals, probably more realistically quarterfinals. But listen, in terms of the West, that's going to be very good because actually I think all the other teams in the West, I don't think any of them are going to get out the group.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty fair bet. Although we can always hope for a miracle on ice, right? That's really all I want to see is either the Korean or the Chinese team, just bleed a little bit. Watch them shaking up in the finals and be like, oh no, maybe we're not gonna win this year. Although that's what I've been hoping for since I've always watched esports on a
The thing is,
competitive level.
the main reason that's stopping the teams getting out of the group is actually just the system.
Yeah.
It's if they use the same system, because you have to realize there's actually no other esport I know of that's like that, where literally they're making it so you can only have one team from a region in a group. And so in doing so, you're actually making it harder for Western teams to win because you're almost ensuring that most of them are going to get a Chinese and a Korean team in their group. So you're immediately making it so, well, they're obviously not a favorite already. Whereas if it was a tournament where, so in CS, okay, we have qualification from different regions, but it's just an open tournament in theory, you know. There's no biases and no limitations to the regions. So obviously you can have a group that's all 4 Europeans if you want, you know, that could be a group. Yeah. So if it was like that in Worlds, then just the group draw would sometimes give people a chance to come out in first place of a group and get the easier matchup, sometimes to play another Western team in the round of 8, and then you'd get into a world where maybe these teams could maybe get the crazy bracket and go to a final one day. But I just think the structure makes it really hard if you're from the West at the moment.
Yeah. Also, I'm glad that we're calling them Westerners now. That feels pretty good. I'm still kind of used to being called foreigners when it comes to competing against Korean and Chinese. Oh, here come the foreigners. I'm like, man, this is MLG Dallas. We're not the foreigners here. It's always kind of bugged me. Now it's Westerners. That's good. Feels good about that. We're stepping up in the world. But yeah, one day North America, I think, is we're going to come back. I don't know when that day is going to be, or even if League of Legends is going to be popular and even played in Korea or China at that point, but we're going to do it. It's going to happen.
The problem is that team that does it is just going to be a team full of Korean players that came to America.
Probably.
I mean, really. It's just going to be an organization that spent a lot of money.
If you think about it, that's actually what's funny is that even though those rules were put in place to make it so you could only have 2 foreign players, as in within a region, foreign to that region, so you could only have 2 Koreans in a North American team. Unfortunately, it's the fact that China just decided to buy the Korean players that actually stopped that happening. Like, if you think about it, a lot of them would have still stayed in Korea who would have been very good, but some of them, like, I actually know for a fact, some of the Samsung players, even before Worlds, were like, if I don't qualify for Worlds, I'm just going to retire. And if I win Worlds, maybe I'll retire anyway. So some of those players actually would have actually gone to NA, I'm pretty sure, and would have tried out. Because the thing is, it still would have been more money than they'd make in Korea. It just no one can compete with the Chinese dollars. That's the problem. So as a result, that's why no one did. I mean, you've even seen in an interview, Spirit literally said he wanted to go to NA. Like, he wanted to join Cloud9. He wanted to join CLG. But they waited too long, the NA teams, or some of them just didn't want to do it. And then the Chinese offer was like so overwhelming. It's like, well, if I haven't got any options and it's this much, what choice do I have? You know. So actually, what's funny is if the Chinese situation hadn't happened, you would definitely be seeing right now legendary players from Korea playing right now in NA LCS.
That would have been very, very.
Would have been interesting, right?
That would have been very, very interesting.
I'm never sure if that's healthy for the scene or not. I always get worried about like where like a Blizzard situation happened when they started WCS, where you get all these godly Koreans injected into a North American scene, and then there's no longer any more North American talent that can compete. Like we had, you know, Scarlet, and she was amazing, but you know that was kind of the only one at that point when WCS was just getting started. So if we have all these amazing players come in, you get one or two options, right? Either the other players step up, you know, they step up their game and they start competing with the other talent around them, or they just get stomped so hard that they're like, fuck it, I'm going to become a coach. It's just easier, right?
Okay, but you can't have it both ways.
No, like, you can never have it both ways.
Here's
it's
the
only
thing.
one or the other.
There's 2 options, okay?
I know.
You can either keep all Koreans out of North America, in which case you're saying that like helps talent grow and all the rest of it. But then what's the reason when that talent grows as to why you're going to say they can't compete with Koreans? That they can't practice Koreans, they don't get to play them at all. So which is it? Do you want, can Koreans come in and practice against them? Like, I think it goes either way. Like you can't be both at the same time. So in a way, yes, there would be negatives, but in another sense, it could also be positives in the sense that you're injecting better players in the ecosystem for other people to practice with, and it won't. I don't think it'll naturally make people better, but it forced them to be. So the ones who had the potential,
competition,
it unlock it. You know, it accelerated to it.
Well, I think and I mean, even if it doesn't make players better, I think it would weed out lesser players in a sense where, you know, if you're
by the way.
yeah, no,
that's what Oh, listen, I don't want anyone getting a salary who's just crap.
Yeah.
Like the idea of like, some guy in the 10th best team, like, oh, it's so great that he's from North America and does terribly and gets that salary. Like, I don't know about that. You want the good players to have a chance, the guys with potential to come through. But some of those people just pick up a check for a split and then they're not really going to be relevant, you know. So it's great for them. There's no reason everyone else has to cheer that they got some salary.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of good. It's not really fair, but I mean, someone always has to lose, right? You do have to have enough teams to fill out a split. I mean, you see that in every single region. Though. There's always teams that aren't necessarily worthy of being there, but you do have to have a certain amount of players to fill out a tournament. But that's always going to be the case. I guess in a perfect world, every team is an SK Telecom, and we don't have any, Dignitas or Coasts or XDGs or anything to kind of muddy up the water. But, that's utopia.
Well, you do know it's actually entirely possible to have tournaments where you don't have bad teams. What you do is you take all the best teams and you put them in a tournament, and then you run that tournament a few times. And therefore, you've got 3 or 4 tournaments a year that have the best teams. But instead, that's not an option. We live in a paradigm where people can't even consider that as an option. Instead, people have to hope that some team, does Coast make it back in? Are they okay now? Like, that's actually a enforced paradigm that doesn't have to exist.
So in your perfect tournament structure internationally, how does this work? Can you break this down for us?
It's the same in most of the other esports, mate. Like in CS:GO, we just have the best teams go to the tournaments and we watch them. And the whole discussion about who's like good in some lesser, I don't have to worry about that. I just watch the good teams play. I enjoy watching the great matches. I see actually that directly gives the teams who are good in their region or good in one country, but not the best internationally. It's constantly showing them parity wise, like, is their lineup good enough? Where do they need to improve? Can they build upon a result beforehand? I think it actually helps everyone to a degree.
Oh, yeah. I mean, is that possible within the league scene? I mean, we have so many different regions and also so many different teams within a region. We're so used to splits now, right? Where we get 9 weeks of tournaments 4 times a week. Would we be able to shift to just like 3 tournaments a year and then just do 16 games in a tournament? Is that?
I mean, you can have regional tournaments in the meantime. Here's the thing: people in League of Legends, it's like have you ever seen that movie?
We got our blinders on. We only watch the one game. We don't like to pay attention to anybody else.
There was a movie called, I think it was Pleasantville, and the premise of this movie.
Black and white. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so they don't even know that color can exist.
Yeah.
That's what people in League of Legends are like, except it's not even that in your world, black and white's all that exists. It's that they used to be color. You just don't even remember it anymore. And you think now that black and white's all that exists, okay. So first of all, there was season 2. There was LANs every single month in season 2. They were all over all the regions. Yeah. Teams went into region and competed. Teams could choose where they went. It was an open circuit. Not only that, in other games, you have circuit. Okay, put it this way. Okay, I do like CS:GO analysis for LAN tournaments in CS:GO. I've already done 8 LAN tournaments in 2015, and I didn't accept every job I was offered. This year, there will probably be 20, 25 LAN tournaments. That's just in CS:GO. So logistically, it's no problem whatsoever to put on that many tournaments. And the top teams, by the way, like I think the number 1 team at the moment's already played 12 tournaments this year, 12 LAN tournaments.
And these are internationally, right? They're jet setting everywhere, or is it? Yeah.
Some are in Europe, some are in NA, but in general, if you're a good team, you try and travel around to most of them, you know. And the idea is you can choose the ones you want to go to. So not everyone's been to all of them. Some pick one where it's a bad week or they're introducing a new player, they skip that tournament. But you have to realize, even in League of Legends, this is possible. Here's an interesting fact for you, okay? So in League of Legends, there was always more games of League of Legends played in some of the Asian leagues, okay? So like LPL always had a massive schedule for their league. But LPL had 2 splits, just like in Europe and North America. And they had about 8 LAN tournaments separate to LCS over the same year. Now, how did they do that? It's because logistically, it's not even vaguely impossible. They have half the week off in League of Legends. Nothing happens. Also, the paradigm is so set that people don't even think of the fact that at the moment, they purposely make it so that EU LCS isn't on the same days as any LCS. Well, that doesn't even make sense. What? So if you're a fan of LCS, what, do you have to watch both regions? They're not even the same league. They shouldn't have any, in theory, they should be on whenever it was most appropriate to those regions. It shouldn't have anything to do with being able to watch all of them, you know. This is actually how a normal sport works. Like, I don't know when I have any leagues that purposely schedule separately in other sports in different regions. This is like a weird Riot and Pros paradigm where once you accept it, you have no options at that point. That's usually the Riot way. It's like, here's the problem I created. Oh, well, what are we going to do about that? I have a solution. Like, oh, well, I'm not sure that solution is perfect. It's the only one, though, isn't it? Well, I can't argue with you. That's how usually I find dealing with Riot is. And then you're like, well, we could improve it in this way. That's never really been tried before. It's actually how it previously was. Now, that wouldn't work. And then in a few months, they come out, same policy, they introduce it themselves. We've just invented this new policy. It's called the Best of 5 series. We think it's going to improve a lot the competition level, competitive technique.
Best of 5, copyright, Riot Games.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Wow.
That's
I never thought of that. Best of 5? Get the fuck out of here.
I mean, if they were really evil, they should just actually, like, not even call it the same name. They should call it, like, we call it an extended elimination series. And it's a new invention. Actually, we have guys with PhDs in psychology who investigated, and they found out that actually it would test the metal and find out the championness, copyright, of the players competing in it, you know?
They should. They could even take it one step further into a best of 5, but with actual MLG extended series in it. So if you, if you lost a game against a team and you had to come back and play that team later on in the tournament, that loss counted against you in that series. So you would take a best of 3, it would become a best of 5, but you're 1 or 2 losses down. So that's what we do. We do a best of 5 MLG extended series. Hashtag or copyright Riot Games.
You heard it here first.
I love it. It's great. Back to what you said about having so many tournaments within CS:GO and other sports, which is kind of the standard there. How is that on the players? If they're traveling from time zone to time zone to time zone over the course of 8 weeks, do they have the time to practice and rest and eat and not totally burn their brains out playing this game? I mean, is there off time for them?
Yeah, that's the good thing.
Because
it's
the health
because
of
it's
the
not
players
mandatory.
Yeah,
it's entirely optional which tournaments you attend. So if you're burned out, you take 2 tournaments off. That's the problem. Is actually League of Legends is worse. League of Legends has worse burnout with less games. Because you know what happens in League of Legends if you're a good team? So you were talking about Fnatic before.
Yeah.
Remember the old Fnatic teams of 2013, 2014? They made the finals of every LCS and they won 3 of them. So here's what happened in 2014 for Fnatic. Okay, they came back from Worlds in the year before, and they had an IEM Cologne event, then they had Battle of the Atlantic. Then they had a couple of weeks before the season began in 2014. They played all of the spring split. They won the spring split. They had to keep practicing because they're the top team. They want to stay in shape the few weeks off. Then they keep the same roster for the summer split. They play all of the summer split. They finish top 2. They qualify for Worlds. They go to Worlds. Right, at this point, you've just used like 10 months of their lives, and they've never had a break in this 10 months.
There's time
they
off
played
in
All-Stars
between
as well.
too.
No, they played All-Stars during the break off between.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So actually, by being successful, they were punished and never had a break.
That's
Not
very
only that,
difficult.
think about how LCS works. Because you're only going to play on these set days, it sets the impetus that you should spend every day between practicing for those days, because those 2 games mean everything. It's not like a tournament. That's the other thing. In Counter-Strike, you can also let off steam by failing. You can just do badly in one tournament, and that's not your whole season ruined. You come back next tournament, you fix things, you change it a bit. Now you win this tournament. Next one, you place top 3. In the world of League of Legends, 3 bad weeks is the end of your season. You can't win anymore when you have 3 bad weeks in a row. So the pressure is even higher. You never get time off in League of Legends. And also, what happens if you're not scrimming and you're not playing LCS games? Well, you're a piece of shit if you're not playing solo queue every hour of the day, because apparently Koreans do that. And every fan will be on your ass. If you're losing and your account isn't in Challenger, you're just a piece of shit. Like, you don't even deserve to have a salary or a place to live. So actually, the pressure and the burnout is worse in League of Legends. That's why, aside from, it's true, the meta aspect does throw players' careers off. That's actually my theory, though, in League of Legends, why the career lifespan is so much shorter for players. Because there's very few people can handle that much play. Like in StarCraft, it wasn't the case that every player could handle practicing all the time. What they did was essentially StarCraft and StarCraft 2 were a grinder that you just pushed so much meat through that the few players who could make it out the other side were just like exceptional mutant humans who really could practice 18 hours a day without mentally breaking. And some people were really talented and were really good for like 6 months, you know. And then after the grinder got through them, they were no one, you know. They were just burned out husks who couldn't even play anymore. And it wasn't lack of talent, you know. So I actually think in League of Legends, especially for Westerners, where I don't think people are programmed for that sort of lifestyle anyway. No. I think it's overboard already, you know. That's why I'd actually rather tournament stuff anyway. because I'd rather have like a circuit where you have, first of all, you have pre-planned breaks, and then the player has his own kind of choice within. Like he can manage his own career. Because in other games I've seen where it's an open circuit, no one dominates every tournament. Even the greatest players have to learn how to peak. Like, okay, I'm in a bad slump right now. Maybe I just take the next tournament easy, try some experimental stuff. Then I build my way back up. Okay, I had a good result there. Now I'll go in a bit harder. You don't just go 100% for every tournament. You'll get burned out on any circuit, I think.
Some valid points. Yeah. I was just, oh, wow, I totally lost my train of thought. It's getting a little bit past my bedtime at 11 o'clock because I'm old. Yeah, with the circuits, because that's the way it was when it was MLG and it was the one that was always held in Vegas, the one that was held in casinos.
IPL?
IPL. Those were the two big circuits, right? And so you would run all over the country running MLG, and then every now and then you would stop in Vegas and do an IPL, and then both different prize pools, totally unrelated tournaments, but we were still seeing the same teams dominate, weren't we? Or wasn't it still TSMs, CLGs, and sometimes Dignitas, depending on which Dignitas actually showed up that day? So the ecosystem kind of seemed roughly the same, but I guess the game was a lot younger there. We didn't have the same kind of talent. It is. So I guess is it possible for Riot to break it back up again? Can we break up Max Steel down into smaller tournaments and then kind of divorce it?
Here's another factor,
Yeah.
okay? So people will always say, well, the good thing about LCS is it helps out the little guy. Like it helps out the Maple Street type guy to get into LCS, get a salary, get some experience under his belt. But why do those guys never go anywhere? Like put it this
they
way,
never get better.
think about the LCS format. So in Europe, Fnatic's been in every single split final. Okay, now let's go to NA. It's been TSM and Cloud9 in every split that TSM and Cloud9 both existed.
Yeah.
And then the one split it wasn't, it was TSM, and there was once a shocking upset, which is when Good Game University made it to the final, thanks to Curse completely breaking down. But aside from that, it's the same story, what you've just described here. The circuit is still the same top teams winning, making it to the final. The rich keep getting richer to a degree. The problem now is, actually, it's the other way around. It's that the guys who are the little guys spend most of their career playing to reach the playoffs, get beaten in one best of series, and then they're back to the regular split again. So they're never even playing the real competitive environment, which is playoffs. Playoffs is where you really start as a professional. You test your mettle. You see how good you are. You don't just play a best of one and cheese a guy, you know? That's where you really get experience as a professional. And a lot of these players don't get it, you know? They're playing, it's either a relegation series or it's the first round of the playoffs. That's it for most people. So I actually think it hurts people that they only have 2 opportunities a year to even play what I consider real League of Legends.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like the overarching solution is to do more series, more brackets, more series, less overarching group stages, right? Because when Riot started this, the whole idea behind it, I guess, was to try and develop storylines, right? Those are the interesting part of tournaments, is watching the underdog come in. You know, you want to see teammate, oh, look, they're the underdog, and then they build their way up through the top of the LCS ladder, and then they make it to playoffs, and you kind of want to see
Do you think
this.
they do a good job of that?
No, it's not working. But
here's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Okay. I bet I could
grill.
grill.
That's the idea. That's the idea.
I bet I could grill almost anyone who. Okay, have you watched all the LCS seasons?
No.
I've watched.
When did you start watching?
A lot of them.
Well, I started season 2.
Okay,
right?
that's all. Yeah,
Season
that's all
3.
LCS.
Yeah, 'cause that's
season
all,
3
yeah.
was LCS.
Okay, yeah.
Rated,
So
yeah,
started
okay.
at the end of season 2.
So
yeah.
I'm not even going to go to a crazy one here. Okay, so a year ago, only 1 year ago, was the spring split of 2014, right? Do you know where Curse finished up at the end of that season?
4th.
Yeah, they finished 4th place, so a top 4 team. Now, can you tell me roughly what the storyline of Curse was over that split?
They have been 4th place.
Forever.
No, what happened? What were the ups and downs? Like, what were the key matches you remember them winning?
No, I don't remember anything because there's no.
No, there's
story.
none of them.
The only thing to remember about Curse is Forever Fourth.
Yeah.
And by the way, in the same scenario, that happens in other sports as well. So in the NHL, in the NBA, I watch most of the games of the good teams. Unless it's like a big game like the Christmas Day one, or like the 2 leading teams who are both locked in a race, and that's like going to be the morale decider. Most teams, you can't remember what happened to them, the storyline prior to the playoffs. From the playoffs, everyone can remember, right? They played this series, and then they were an underdog here, and they got 2 games here, and then they actually lost to this team, but like one player really took over the series. We can all remember the storylines in the playoffs. No one can remember the storylines and the narratives in the regular season. Now, yeah, it packs television screens and it gives you airtime to fill up. That's true. That's all the case. But actually, I think it does a worse job of telling storylines. Meanwhile, if you've ever watched OGN, when OGN previously was a tournament, every season it was a short group stage straight into brackets. Right. Every single team who made it beyond even the first round, we all know the storylines of them. Like, oh, they weren't doing that well in the group, but then they got like the right opponent in the round of 8, and then this player really emerged as a legendary player, and he became the next top jungler, and then they got into the semifinals unexpectedly. The storylines actually are automatically there thanks to the format. You don't even need the lock of like having an amazing tournament every time. So I actually think that's another problem in terms of the narrative aspect. That Riot will tell you they do it for the narratives, etc. Yeah. But I actually think it doesn't bear out in the fruit. I don't think you've seen that many great narratives, especially as like I told you, the narrative in LCS is like Cloud9 and TSM were in every final. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
Great story. Yeah, awesome.
We got lucky with good game. I guess that was kind of the only one, right? Yeah. And even then they didn't win.
I mean, this is honestly, this split is like the first time where we're looking at potentially having 3 teams, whatever, in the top 3 teams aren't going to be
we still got
potentially. I mean I'm talking about even in just America's sake, where it's always C9, TSM, it's either CLG, Dignitas, one of those teams. We're looking at where now you have Gravity who's in first. You have Impulse who's showing a lot. I mean, Team Liquid's Team Curse, that doesn't really count. But
they're actually playing well.
But yeah, they're not fourth. Yeah. But so it's this is the first time where maybe those old guard teams who you could always sit there and set your watch them. It's like, okay, well, it's the spring split, so TSM's going to be first or second, and C9 will probably be whatever one that they're not. It's
C9, TSM, and someone else.
This is the first time that maybe I'm not saying that we're gonna have a that Gravity is the great white hype, so to speak. Where America is gonna this is we're gonna hitch our card onto Team Gravity and they're gonna ride it straight into Worlds up Koreans' ass, because it's not gonna happen. But I mean, this is could this potentially be a team that actually beats a Korean team? Maybe not. But it's nice to see, at least from my perspective, someone that's not the same old tired story. And I don't necessarily think Riot has anything to do with that, because they're not the ones creating compelling storylines. They just create long seasons that lead into what they hope is going to be. Ooh, it's Worlds. Let's pick the best team in the world. Where it's 99% of the time a Korean team or a Chinese team, or at the very least some Southeast Asian, whatever. So,
the thing is, this is actually something I've even thought about. I actually think that taking away tournaments is what's eroded the storyline. Yeah. Because actually, I'll use the exact same kind of setup format that I used there to tell you the storyline actually of a team using an LCS format as if it was a tournament circuit. Okay, so there was a split. Let's actually think of the two splits ago. So summer split of 2014. This was the one where, during the season, Curse spent majority of the split down in the bottom 3. They were hanging around with Complexity, and then what was the other one? Who was the worst one overall? That might have been.
Was it XDG?
No, it was the split after that.
Last year's spring split.
Coast.
Summer split.
Coast. Or were they out?
It was Complexity.
Coast was already gone at that point.
You know what? They invented the internet for a reason.
Anyway, some other team. Yeah.
So the problem is, Curse was always down with that team there, and they were in a position where, it might have been Team 8 or someone. So when they were down at that position, that was for like the first 2/3 of the season, maybe the first 3/4 overall. And so if this had been a LAN circuit, okay, say it was 5 LAN tournaments, for the first 2 to 3 LAN tournaments, they're getting wrecked constantly. They're going out in group stage. They're going out first round of the playoffs. Maybe they win a game off someone every now and then, but they lose the series 2-1. They lose the series 3-1. You'd see the storyline that like they're not a good team right now. But they kept with the same lineup. It was the one where they had Voyboy mid. This was actually the season when he was playing that, and it was his second split saying that. And what happened was, partway through the season, he started to come on as a mid player. He innovated a few picks. He started using like Talon mid and Tristana mid. He was like using a bunch of the AD champions because he wasn't that good on the AP champions, admittedly. And it started to work, actually. They had a solid foundation of the team. They had some good players that are still on Liquid now. And it started to get together, okay? It started to work. Now, towards the end of the split, once you got to like the last quarter of the split, suddenly Curse just goes to overdrive. They're winning all these games off the top teams. They put together like a string of results. On the last week, they actually I think won maybe like 5 games, maybe 4 games on the Super Week. So now imagine these are tournaments. They're gradually rising up. They get a top 4 placing in one tournament. Then they make the finals of the next one, shockingly. Then on the last tournament, maybe they even win it. Maybe they're literally the best team in North America for that 1 week. Now, in the playoffs, yeah, they got to the semifinals. They placed Cloud9. Cloud9 were always beating people back then. Cloud9 just cleaned them out. Okay, at the end of the season, that's actually not a very satisfying storyline there. You had a little spike at the very end of the Super Week. Then you beat CLG. Okay, great, in one series. That's your reward. You get one series, and then Cloud9 beats you in the series. If that had been 3 or 4 or 5 tournaments, yeah, you'd have lost the first few. But first of all, the storyline would be really memorable like that. Like, it started off so badly the first few. It improved a bit. Then we won a week. You actually gain on all aspects of the story. There's more nuance to it, There actually is story points. Whereas the big problem I'm kind of highlighting here is an LCS season isn't a story. A story isn't like a man was born, he died at age 32. Like, it's what happened in his life between then. And yet every LCS split is like, Fnatic was in this LCS split and they won it. Oh, okay, I guess the story was they were just always the best, right? You don't know because there's no story points between point A and point B.
And it's spread out. There's no... there really is no peaks and valleys when you just get 2 games a week, right? It's, I went 1-1 this week. I went 1-1 this week. I went 1-1 this week.
Think of how finalizing that is.
Yeah.
So actually, Cloud9 beat Curse in the semifinals 3-0. But Cloud9, during the middle part of the split, had been having their issues. They were tied for 6th place at one point in time. They were losing games to lower teams. Let's say they play Curse then when Curse hits their peak. Maybe Curse even beats them in a series then. Now when they play in the semifinals, if Cloud9 beats them 3-0, the storyline's even better for Cloud9. It's like, wow, we actually lost to them earlier in the season, but now we closed it out when it really mattered in the finals, as it were, the season finals. Meanwhile, for Curse, similar thing. Like, hey, we did beat them before. We know we can hang with them. We're not terrible. But then when we lose 3-0, obviously on this day, the strategy was wrong. The players didn't perform. But it's not as final as like, oh, I guess Cloud9 is just 100% better than Curse. Like, that's actually not even a good storyline in itself, It doesn't tell the whole story.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day, maybe we can start getting more series in. I mean, if there's any indication of what Riot does, they tend to adopt the methods of more successful regions, right? Isn't that kind of... Well, I guess not. They kind of made up this whole summer split.
Well, I think it's crazy because, they've created this whole LCS thing, which is, ultimately pretty uncompelling, league. And then, they did something, this was the first year they did MSI. And it's like, ooh, we're going to have a world tournament. And it was like the best thing that they ever did in terms of, people watching and people giving a crap and you're pitting your best against their best. And sure, for America, it didn't go so well. But for
good games,
But I'm just saying, is as far as the health of the game as a watchable sport, or as with people giving a crap about the games. I mean, this was the first time that people were like, wow, not just, oh look, C9 is in first place and they play TSM this week. I hope C9 beats TSM. This is like, whoa, this is everything felt like it meant something.
Here's the thing. It's like another paradigm scenario. Why does it have to even be one or the other? Like, why can't the season be... here's an idea, okay? So here's how the year goes. Let's say we have Worlds in October, November, like it usually is at the moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why can't there be one league that's an LCS, but that's only in the run-up to Worlds? That qualifies you for Worlds, because for whatever reason, Riot's decided a league format's best to build the storyline to Worlds and to qualify you into Worlds, okay? So we'll have the league be just before Worlds. But essentially, Summer Split's going to exist for me. But after Worlds... I'm not going to have a spring split, okay? Between Worlds ending and Summer Split starting, so let's say 6 to 8 months, maybe even more, maybe 9 to 10 months, I'm going to have this massive period where, can't be 9 to 10, would it? Because I haven't included Summer Split. So let's say like 5 to 6 months, okay? Yeah. We're going to have this period be, in theory, totally open. But what we'll do is they'll have third-party tournaments, or we'll have a tournament circuit. And then either that could be like a circuit that built into qualifying for the Summer Split, or it can just be an open circuit where, first of all, you can choose not to attend tournaments if you're burned out and you have problems like that. And also, then you have tournaments and the league. So you've got the best of both worlds there. Why does it have to be a league all the time and then a few tournaments? Like, it's another scenario where the choice, like, I don't even understand the premise of the question when it's set up like that by a Riot type person. It's like you decided in the first place it had to be leagues all the time. You could do both, actually.
Yeah, I think some of the problem was if you're... What was always, there was always backlash when somebody chose not to participate in a tournament, right? Like if you're like, oh, I'm not going to go to this tournament this week, your fans and your sponsors probably, I don't know, I'm not really on the business side of things, are like, oh my God, he's not going to that tournament. What's going on? Is he sick? Is he burnt out? Is he tired of playing? Can he not play anymore? And then all this speculation starts flying around, and then people start tweeting at sponsors, oh my God, at HyperX, Kingston, why is your team not going to this tournament? I was going to be there, want an autograph, never buying Kingston memory again. Is that
okay? So in Europe right now,
it's that vocal top 1% that's so loud. They make everything so difficult. So I think it's that safety versus freedom argument, right? Which one do you want? Do you want to be safe and cozy in your LCS where you have a salary and you have a paycheck and you get the same payment every week, and then sometimes you win a lot of money and that's great? Or do you want to grind it out with the tournaments?
You very rarely win a lot of money, by the way. Like
what?
The first place for each split is $40,000 if you're first place. Yeah. You can only do that 2 times a year, and that's if you finish first.
Yeah, but then you get the salary on top of it. But then you get the money for Worlds. But I mean, if you're from North America, then
you don't win any money there.
Then you don't get the money for Worlds.
Yeah, but you always have the salary. I guess that's it. So without I don't even know what I'm saying without that. Without the LCS, some of these teams aren't getting any salary, so they're only going on sponsor money. And if they're not going to a tournament, then the sponsors are gonna be like, why are we paying you any money if you're not going to tournaments? Because you're burn out, and then things can get kind of
so
wonky.
Which do you think would be better? Should we let Bill Gates and Steve Jobs make billions of dollars with incredible innovations, leading their fields, doing some of the most best work of anyone? Should they be allowed to make the millions of dollars because they're that good? Or should we take all the billions of dollars and say, you know what, a good salary for someone is about $150,000. So you're going to have $150,000 a year. That's yours. You can keep that now. But we're going to give all your money to a bunch of people who are unemployed, who don't have very good jobs. We're going to spread out all the money like that. That's what LCS is. LCS is communism, basically.
It's communism.
It really is.
It really is. It is.
Oh my God.
I knew it.
What you're doing is you're choosing who gets that money. It's not that you're giving everyone the money. That's a mistake, because actually people like Froggen, people like TSM players, people from Fnatic would have won a lot more prize money and would have made the similar salaries, by the way. They would have been at the top end of the scene. They would have made as much money, if not more. In fact, I can argue probably more. Now, in terms of people who are at the low level, they wouldn't have made anywhere close to that much. So you're choosing who gets more money. Does the guy who's the worst player in the league get the more money, or does the guy who's the best player? Now, I don't know of any Western society that actually thinks that it's better for the people who are the best to not get that much more.
We're not allowed to think that. It's taught.
But apparently that's okay in LCS, though. That's fine.
Except within
punish the guy who's really good, because we need to give this guy who's just okay a similar sort of salary.
He's got to get his Chipotle. I mean, those burritos are expensive, and you got to have a check to get that.
So literally, LCS is the most un-American kind of a sport.
It really is.
Oh my God.
Good design.
Wow.
I think we should get McCarthy and let him investigate LCS.
Right?
I agree.
Maybe that's why Nick Allen had to leave. Maybe he's going to set up some sort of tournament in Ukraine or something.
The Red Army.
Riot's logo is red.
Yeah. Oh my God. Somebody get me the tinfoil. Making a hat.
It's like the old joke, that we made a while ago, which is, imagine you want to know the future of LoL eSports. Imagine a red fist pounding on a human face to infinity.
Wow, there's a solid political comic.
Right? I like this.
That's going on the cover of Time. That's amazing.
That's a New Yorker. That's in the New Yorker right there. That is that's poignant.
Eyebrow.
Right?
That's great. You mentioned the Nick Allen moving to Twitch. We if we are putting on the tinfoil hat now, what does this say about Riot's influence within, their overarching grasp to the esports community? Is this like some type of Game of Thrones-esque play for them to take over streaming? Or is this just Nick Allen actually moving somewhere closer to his family to make things easier for his
no one who works for Riot Games who would even last as a character on Game of Thrones. Anyone who works for Riot would be someone who just gets shanked at the beginning of one episode. You don't even get to know the surname of, and their dead body's dragged off somewhere to be burned by rats. Like, there's no one interesting enough that any Game of Thrones level analogy would even work for that sense. So with that said, I actually don't. The problem with this move is I don't think Nick Allen ever had the power that people imagine he did. Like, he was just a lightning rod that everyone complained to and complained about, as though he as though he sat in his decision-making office and was like, you know what, today I think I'll find CLG for this reason. I don't think he ever made those decisions. I think if you notice the way Riot tends to behave, they are very much like an organization. And the idea is there aren't dissenting opinions in Riot. You never hear them. You are never allowed to hear, even within political parties, which in theory have this kind of fall in line approach. Even within political parties, there's one representative thinks a totally different opinion on the evolution, whether it should be a policy in schools, and he opposes this guy, and you know publicly from votes that they oppose each other internally. With Riot, it's always this united front. We all agree this is the way, this is the philosophy that's guided this decision, this is why we've done this, and we think morally this and that and the other. So there's no way Nick Ello was making all those decisions. So I don't expect the decisions to even change that much. I actually think a lot of them were coming from other people. And another factor people from the outside don't know about Riot is that some of the decisions that they make, especially about like accounts and boosting and these sorts of things, don't even come from the esports people. They have this separate division of player behavior which don't treat esports people like they are professionals. Think about this. Imagine if the NBA didn't make decisions on how people were treated in terms of behavior in game. What happened was the NBA had a different body that was next to them, which told them what player decision to make based on a body of people that were overseeing every basketball game played in the entire world. Even street kids in Brazil playing a game. These people tried to dictate the behavior of every game in the whole world. And so if a pro player did something like, for example, like a forearm shiver into someone, well, obviously we wouldn't want kids doing that on the street in basketball in Brazil, would we? That could start a fight and someone could get killed. So then you treat the pro player with the same harsh penalty to try and stop that as you would, whereas you wouldn't. The NBA would do it on a case basis based on the fact it's a pro game. What kind of relationship do these players have? Are these players who even know each other? Is a bit of that allowed? Is some jostling allowed? You have to go obviously case by case. Riot doesn't do that. They do it on such a global scale in that sense that unfortunately, a lot of these lightning rods, it's almost a waste of time focusing on them. I don't think they have that much say over it. I think Riot as the company is going to roll on with similar decisions anyway. So I think whoever replaces him officially, it'll be business as usual, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's this kind of same thing when Ghostcrawler came onto the Balance team, where everyone was like, "Oh my God, Ghostcrawler is going to ruin this game because he was, the lead balance designer for WoW, and he's going to make all these decisions." And then he kind of came on, and things didn't really change. It's still a pretty hefty trend of nerfing people down to the same level, and instead of buffing other ones up or accidentally over buffing some champions so they become ridiculously OP. And then Ghostcrawler even comments on that. He comes
when you
on
join
forums.
the Borg, you don't change the Borg. The Borg simulates you.
Right. Yeah, that's the way it works. I think everyone's just becoming Cybermen, right? Everyone's all on the same neural network, and they're having the feelings removed when they go to Riot Games. That's the way it works. Oh man, that's dark. We took this to a dark place. Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Hey, but listen, truth's the truth.
Yeah. So Riot, just to recap, not only is Riot a communist society, they are also a network of Cybermen trying to take on the world. So let's take off the tinfoil hat.
Put that on the side. Right over here.
That'll go over here. Let's move on to something else.
Let's move on.
Oh my gosh. Did you want to talk about the Chris Badawi situation and kind of how this thing is unfolding? Well, it's just.
You want to get a doll out and ask where he touched me?
No,
please.
That's the approach everyone else is taking, right?
Pretty much. I mean, everyone is kind of, it's like shots fired all over the place now.
That's what bothers me about it, is that everyone is just burying this guy, and I don't know how much of it is true or who to believe or who has credibility. I mean, Jeebus just made a twit longer, standing up for Badawi, right? Saying that G2 was totally screwing him over contract-wise, and Badawi came with an actual opportunity that was good for him, and so he took it. So I mean, I don't know if you can provide any context or can you lend credibility to any type of this situation, or it just all stinks like shit.
Well, before you jump in, the funny thing is that Jeebus made that statement. Is that earlier today, Gamers2 came out, made their statement about that SK was trying to buy their whole team from them without them knowing, and how Jeebus got poached from them by Renegades. And how Jeebus was like, oh, but they treated me really good, and I'm gonna give them, the money that I make, and how he completely, how he came out and said the complete opposite of that, and it's a really muddy, odd, awkward situation, and it's just, I'd love to know.
I don't know who to believe.
You're right. It reeks of bullshit.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, listen, then maybe my nose is off. But
I mean, it could be that Chris is just a total dick. I don't know. I never met the guy. I don't actually have enough content or context to develop a decent opinion on this thing. I just don't know who to believe.
Well, no one does. That's the thing.
Yeah. So
it reminds me of this old joke. Okay, it's a Doug Stanhope joke from one of his specials, where he says, okay, he saw this is in like the maybe it was like 2008 or something. He saw a poll and it said like, what do you think the odds are that there will be a major terrorist attack? No, that there will be a major terrorist attack at a major sporting event this year. So like, the Super Bowl, something like this, like the NBA finals, whatever. And the poll was just like a CNN poll in America. And the poll was sort of like, 55% definitely, 30% quite likely, 10% possibly, it was split up like that. And the joke was 99% of people should have been don't know. Like it should be a huge pie chart of don't have any clue, have no information to make that sort of a speculation on. But what this pie chart showed was most people, given no information, no clues, will give you a very strong opinion of what they think about that topic, which is like exactly what's going on with this Badawi thing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we do have some information. We have like people's eyewitness testimony, essentially.
Yeah.
Which you have to remember, it's the worst sort of evidence that exists.
What? No.
That's why you need hard evidence. That's why, like, here's the problem. Courtroom dramas where it all turns on someone's like eyewitness testimony or confession, that's why they're just dramas. That's made up. Like, that doesn't happen in most particular cases. You have to get physical evidence. You have to be able to use like logic. Like you have to be able to put people in a situation, show that they had means to be able to do it, then provide some psychological background for why they might do it, and then provide a situation of like, do they have a history of things like this? Then you have to think, what are the situations where these people who possibly were lying actually maybe even didn't have a reason to say something that was positive and they did. So you add all these factors up and now you're getting close to something. And remember, in the case of a court case, you only come to a final decision there because you're forced to. You're literally forced at one point in time to make a case. That doesn't mean you made the right one even then. In social situations like this, the big problem is no one in public has any evidence. There's none. It's all 100% hearsay. No one has provided any evidence. The little evidence that has been provided has almost certainly been shown to a degree to have been tampered with. Do you remember the initial story about how Chris Badawi, because his most heinous crime, remember, was trying to poach Keith.
Right.
He was trying to poach from Liquid. Liquid 112, the owner of Liquid, was the guy who really was pissed off initially. So why was it initially presented in the first story that what he did was he tried to poach Keith and then he was told by Liquid, like, you can't do that, it's against the rules. And then remember the story was he went back to Keith and he was like, listen, man, let's just pretend this didn't happen,
Right.
Just, you don't have to tell your boss about this, okay? That's how it was presented. That's how it was purposely shown to you. But then what happened when the actual story was revealed? What happened was he was told, like, that's poaching. And he went back and did say something like that. But the tone quite obviously was like, I've sort of found out you're not allowed to do it that way. So can we just forget that conversation happened and start over? That was the obvious tone that anyone reading that without any outside influence would have taken, okay? But instead it was purposely presented in a manner where it was so sinister in another way. Now, if you've got all this rock-solid evidence from 8 different teams or whatever the number is, that this guy's tampering and there are logs of it, why are you taking, in theory, your best case and misappropriating the evidence? Why are you purposely trying to skew it in a certain way? That in itself suggests there's something sinister going on here. When you've got someone banged to rights and you've got all the evidence, you don't then make up some evidence and then present it as your best evidence. Like, that doesn't logically, from a game theory sense, even make sense to me. So I don't know who's really telling the truth or not. I imagine both sides are into some shady shit.
Yeah,
and that essentially this is the Game of Thrones scenario here, by the way. This particular topic. But the problem is, I don't think that there's anyone who's right or wrong in this scenario. Like, I think everyone's wrong to a degree. And also, some of those guys who are pointing fingers right now literally live in glass houses, and we all have rocks. And then they're just like, no one would dare throw a rock at my house, right? Now, let's continue smashing up this guy's glass house.
I liked when Reggie was interviewing and he started just lobbing rocks, and I was like, really, dude? All of the people that are going to open their mouths in a situation, where, shady business deals and and just bad management in terms, really, you're going to open your mouth and you're going to be the moral majority? Reggie, really? You? Come on, man.
Vocal minority. You missed. Correct that for you. That's what he's doing.
I was, air
big
quoting,
quotes. Big quotes.
the moral majority. You know,
I do think that punishment was way harsh, right? Banning him for 2 years. I mean, they essentially took his team away that he came to found.
Yep.
Right? That's super harsh, and also that kind of like if I had a gross sum of money and I want to start a team, I would be kind of hesitant to now, because if I email a player and be like, "Hey, look at me, I'm starting a team," maybe I get kicked out of every Riot event ever because I emailed someone that maybe I'm starting a team.
Also, let's forget whether or not whether he is guilty or not. Let's, for the sake of this premise, assume that he is guilty. Okay, he did everything that they said.
Like
he did approach all these players. Now, here's the problem. I don't know any country in which it's considered ethical to punish people retroactively for things which were not against the law.
Right?
So anyone who's in favor of that, that's where you really see people's biases when they're talking about this topic. Because even if you say that he's guilty and you think he should be punished, you can't punish someone for something that was not against any rule.
That's exactly the same thing that I had said, is that you put these rules in place after this guy broke these rules. Like, all right, well, you know, this clearly needs to be addressed, and now we're going to have these rules in place, and by the way, you're now being held accountable for these rules that didn't exist when you broke nothing. So it's like the most ridiculous thing I ever heard in my life. When I read that, I was like, what? How could this isn't a thing, right? No, it's a thing. Oh, no, this is happening. And then the ban they levied on him, the fact that it was 2 years. I mean, like the ridiculous thing that happened with Deficio prior to that, where Riot's like, hey, look, you know, all right, it's a weird situation, and he was involved in some potentially shady stuff. But, you know, all we want to do is know, listen, Deficio, if you're going to look for another job, just tell us, and then, you know, we'll let you... What? No? In no point in the world if you're looking for another job, are you obligated to tell your employer, hey, by the way, I'm going to look at other companies to do other things first in case I don't want to do this anymore. It's the most ridiculous concept, and the fact
it weirds me out, and I'm curious where these decisions come from sometimes, because they have to be approved by someone. But we kind of touch on that, on how it's an organization, and apparently there's a bunch of people going, like a handful of people going, "That's a great idea, Tom. Let's do that one. Yeah, let's kick him out of the LCS."
And the fact that no one, I mean, like, I feel, you know, and I feel bad. Again, I don't know this guy, Chris. You know, I don't know enough about him. I just know that he was like a lawyer who wanted to get involved in esports and blah, 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 whatever. He could be a total scumbag for all I know. I don't know. I can't make that call one way or the other. What I do know is that nobody came essentially and was just like, hey, this is wrong, what you're doing. Like no one like backed him up on it. It was like,
well, Monty did.
I know Monty did, but I'm just saying, it is, you know, like I realized that none of the other owners of the teams, because, you know, he was the big bad, that he was trying to poach players, and no one was going to say, hey, but you know, if the situation, you know, any one of these teams could get caught for anything like that. I mean, you know, look at CLG. CLG funded friggin' with all
a third of the charity donations.
A third of the charity donations that Riot made was on you know, suspension money that was given to them by CLG, but nothing happened to them. They weren't retroactively suspended for poaching players all over the place.
They also didn't kick Hotshot out of the LCS.
That's what I'm saying. He's guilty. He's just as guilty of the same exact thing. But why? Because he's a well-known player and has been involved in the scene and in the community for significantly longer. And it's okay that he did it. We don't have to retroactively put him on trial and say, hey, sorry, Hotshot, you're out for 2 years. And that sucks, man. We just made this rule up today, though, and you may have broken it 2 years ago, but this is just how we do things.
We tweeted it.
And the fact that nobody said that, you know, it's just, I don't know. That's why
that's also just where people in esports are scum, though.
Yeah.
Like, what people will never do in esports morally. It's funny that it's always put on a moral and ethical level, and yet what people will never do is speak up for something morally that they disagree with when it's a person they don't like.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't like him. Fuck him, even though he's been totally screwed over. Even though that logic in itself ensures you will be fucked over one day when you need people to stand up for you. So in the case of people like Hotshot and other people like that, I don't ever want to hear them ever complain about a fine, because you were on board with something that I'm sure on some ethical level you don't think is correct. People being punished for rules that didn't exist. And probably the worst aspect that people didn't even focus on, I don't get this, is do you remember this line within it where it said that, like, and one of the key problems was that Badawi had not, like, volunteered information on this and had not cooperated with Riot in terms of their investigation. So think about this. Remember, that was the key thing about the second poaching incident for Hotshot GG, was that when CLG kind of got wrecked the first time over the poaching, when they poached the second time, they themselves, this is what a crazy world we live in with Riot, They themselves just went to Riot, like, Riot, I know you don't have any evidence, but I committed a crime and I'd like to confess now. Can I please have immunity?
Right.
And then Riot was like,
My
well
bad.
done, my son, come in. Like, and they like absolved them of the guilt and then like said, and we will get for admitting it, we'll give you a lesser punishment. So what's funny is, at least in that scenario, it was known rules they were breaking.
Yeah.
Essentially, Badawi was supposed to go, I know no rule exists, but if you were to create one, I've broken it.
Just in case.
And here's all the evidence against me. Like, that's actually, again, un-American. There's literally something built into your fucking constitution saying you're not supposed to actually, like, essentially, like, give information that will
You
cause
can't
you
incriminate
to be found
yourself.
guilty.
Yeah, you can't incriminate yourself.
That's such, again, that is un-American as a policy. Who is Riot, and what is their real agenda using the vehicle of esports? What are they trying to do to the youth of
Back
today?
off.
I'm just asking you.
And the whole thing, and like it's just bizarre to me that I feel like it was just sort of, brushed aside. It's like, yeah, this guy fucked up and he's an asshole, and he tried to steal our players, and he got what was coming to him. It's like no one sat there and looked at the bigger picture. It's like, well,
I mean, if you think about it, Riot's symbol even is a perfect fascist symbol, because it shows that 5 separate fingers, in their own rights, there's only so much a finger can do, but a fist combined, the symbol of kind of fascism in a sense, the fasci, that could dominate, that could destroy anything and uphold our true beliefs and our principles that our country was founded on, I'm just saying, who are they? Who are these mysterious people?
Oh, I know.
And how did they get into America?
Something Illuminati, something.
No, but it's
Spooky.
I mean, it's unfortunately it totally, like, when you start to put it together, it's like, man, this crazy talk we're doing doesn't sound so crazy.
Sounds less crazy every week. I feel like we keep kind of erring on that side every single week, less and less crazy. So now Badawi, he's no longer ownership of Renegades, right? So Mati's
He's not allowed to
the
do
sole...
anything if they get to the LCS. He's got to, like, they're just like, okay, you're out.
Right. So now Monty's the sole owner of Renegades, right? I guess, I don't know. I know he came into this organization kind of wanting a more hands-off approach, kind of just wanting to be an owner. I think more of a silent partner once things got rolling. So do you know if he's taking a more active role in the team now? I guess he has to be, or someone has to be.
As far as I know, it's not.
Yeah.
I think it's just doing the same stuff he did before.
Okay.
And I would assume that if this Chris guy really is, I mean, he presented it. Unfortunately, the Badawi guy presented it as though like he's not even trying to own a team and run a business. He's some hero standing up against Riot and trying to give players better conditions. So if that's true, then hey, maybe Badawi just sticks around in the background helping out and all that stuff. If that's his true concern, some humanitarian altruistic goal, he can still do all that without official ownership. There's nothing to stop him there. So if he does that, maybe nothing changes. The big problem I see with this is there was even people who are like, oh, don't worry though, because now it just means Monty gets full ownership. Right? I don't know it. Like, think of this. Imagine you owned half of the LA Lakers, and someone was like, "Oh, we've fired the Well, I guess it did happen to the Clippers. They literally their whole owner got kicked out. But anyway, we'll use the Lakers in this example because the Lakers cost so much money. Now imagine someone says, "Good news, you're half owner of the Lakers, right? Yeah. We've kicked the other guy out of the league, so you have to buy the other half of the team and pay all the costs." You'd be like, well, "What do I gain from that? I was already getting everything out of it." And I already had half ownership. That's what I wanted with my money. If I want to be full owner, guess what? I'll buy the whole fucking team. Like, what is this logic? That's not a good news. You've just given me bad news there. I have sole responsibility for all losses, etc. So I can't see what the upside of that is.
I don't think there is one. I mean, I guess if Renegades fucking goes off the hook, then you can say you're full owner of Renegades. Yeah.
I mean, let's be fair. They're probably going to do fairly well in America. They have a good enough team.
Yeah.
And I mean, and as far as the we'll call it the deep end and the little end. As far as the little end of American and of North American, the LCS is. I mean, they're better than those.
Pool.
They're better than those teams.
More piss than water.
Yeah, call it what it is. I mean, they're better than those teams.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a weird situation to see kind of where they end up and who is going to step up, because it's not going to be Monte Cristo, because I mean he can't full time.
He's busy.
Yeah, he kind of has a
got
job.
Yeah.
And I mean, as far as I know,
well, to be fair, mate, if we look at the career of Hotshot, you don't actually have to do anything to be an owner. Everything else just runs on its own, and you just let the chips fall where they may. Always in the first round of the playoffs.
Had to get a CLG stab in. Wouldn't be Tower and I without it. Makes me sad in the pants.
Yeah, you're the CLG. You're the CLG apologist.
Masochist. Can't help it.
Hey, listen, you can be a fan of the New York Knicks without also being incapable of saying that the owner is an absolute idiot who doesn't know what he's doing, has repeatedly failed in every possible aspect of his responsibilities. You're still allowed to like Carmelo Anthony if you think that. Not just you know.
That's a disaster. That's a disastrous team. That is there. The CLG is the Knicks of they're the Knicks of League of Legends.
Oh my god,
that's a terrible analogy. Oh, you don't want to be on the other end of that.
Doesn't have the same history, like successfully, like it feels like a few decades ago in esports terms. You know, once had a great team. People still think of them as an important team. When will they get it together?
Yeah,
you know, one of the powerhouse names. But where have they been for all these seasons? Who knows? They've got a star player who flounders in mediocrity, never gets the right teammates. Even a good effort from him, he always loses trust in his teammates, doesn't pass them the ball, as it were.
Oh man, this is a wicked analogy. I gotta
always
gotta write that down. Yeah,
yeah, or just don't flat out make it. That's oh my god, that counter logic Knicks. I like that someone in chat just said that.
Counter logic Knicks.
Make that. Got to.
I guess Skara could be Isaiah Thomas then. He would play in the organization.
That's a terrible person to be. That poor bastard. Oh my god. So the CLG.
The CL Knicks.
Where can I go with this? There's so many places to go.
You got to consult your notes.
I'm consulting my notes. I did something I never did. See, this is the respect you get on our show, is that I took notes for this.
Wow.
When I'm just talking to him, I don't take notes.
Not nearly as interesting, apparently. Nope.
So what's going? I mean, I guess let's just kind of, we did the whole battery side of it. So what's going on with the SK side of things, because that's a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this all just kind of came out within the last, 24 hours, whatever it is that, N-Rated was essentially thrown off of the team, and apparently he was the voice of the team, is that everyone else just, he was the guy who, spoke up when they were, when they needed a voice, and they essentially the management threw him off the team. The rest of the team is like, okay, well, then we're not going to play. Again, this is all speculation. I haven't heard anything, from SK as an organization, but apparently there is absolute bedlam going on in the SK camp. And I mean, they're a team that's been around for, it's an organization, as far as organizations go, it's been around in esports for a fairly long time. I mean, you were their editor-in-chief, weren't you, for like,
a couple of years.
Yeah, some years. So, as far as organizations go, I mean, they've never been considered one of those orgs that's like, oh, they're shady. They're not in the same ever in the conversation as like a Meet Your Maker, super hot crew type thing. But here now, I mean, it's literally imploded in like 24 hours, where it's like, what the hell is going on? And what is happening in there? Can you shed a little light? Because I have no idea what's going on.
I mean, the big problem to start off with is that I always look in the server first before I look at the external issues, because you can forget if someone likes someone or doesn't like someone. That doesn't always translate directly into the server into what's happening. So you have to look, what are the game problems? Well, part of the game problems is that a bunch of the players just aren't able to play anywhere close to the level they did last split. I think particularly like Freddy122, who was like a real rock within their team. Mm-hmm. He's had huge problems. It doesn't seem like he fits any of the meta champions at the moment. Mm-hmm. Svenskaren's still really good, but it sounds like when you then link that to external aspects, like even as a jungler before, he never was a guy who like was particularly big on vision control, which is what a lot of teams emphasize now.
Yeah.
Like actually now you look at some of the players and some of the good junglers like Thorin, etc., are just award bots. Well, Svenskaren was the opposite to that. And his whole strength was like warrior type junglers, where he actually tries to actually out-duel you in your jungle. And stuff that doesn't happen now when you're playing these tank junglers. That's just not really the case anymore. So his whole style isn't primed to be like, he's not going to carry the whole team by himself. Now, then you get to the mid lane of Fox, and the big problem was last split, the whole team was built around Forgiven, and it was like, we're going to go as far as Forgiven carries us. And what people forget is they were only one game from making the final of LCS. Like actually, they came fourth place because they also lost the third place game, but they were a 3-2 loss in the semis. So they were still like a top 2, top 3 level team. And they just had a bad end to the split. So they were a good team, but it was all predicated on Forgiven's play, the AD carry. So when he left, they didn't get in a star AD carry. They didn't have one available, so they just got back the old Candy Panda, who's like old, You know what you're going to get from him. He's never going to be a superstar. He's going to be all right. So now, really, with Freddie falling off, it all fell down to this is going to be about what can Fox and Svenskeren do in this team. So Svenskeren is still a star player, but it's not the sort of meta that he can really do a whole lot in. And then, unfortunately, Fox is like a young talent, but he's not like a consistent. He's not like a star, basically. He's not going to carry every game.
Yeah, no.
So just in the server, they were never going to be that good. Maybe if the social aspects hadn't been there, maybe they could be around where like rock art elements, those sorts of teams where you're not the worst, but you're almost near the playoff spots and you're probably not going to make it still. So I don't think they would have made it anyway, just on the in-game stuff.
Yeah.
Then add in the social aspects, and there's a whole bunch of problems there, which is it's easy before when the whole team was based around Forgiven, where if you have problems, you say, oh, it's because Forgiven's too demanding, and, you know, I don't get farm, I don't get my role, I don't get what I want. Well, you got it all now, so how's that going? Oh, careful what you wish for, mate, because sometimes when you get what you wish for, you realize, no, it's your fault if you don't succeed. So there's that aspect. And then also, unfortunately, there's a secondary aspect, which is just a behind-the-scenes thing, which is that SK Gaming has always, within the League of Legends context, been against the concept of inflated salaries. Like, one of the problems is because of the Warcraft 3 days, which were about like 7-8 years ago, in Warcraft 3, there was actually a huge period before the recession that happened of like another bursting of the bubble of the tech market and stuff. There was a big period where salaries just increased constantly by pure inflation, as in one org offers 500 more, I have to offer 600 more, he offers 700 more. And eventually, if you really think about it, it is logical to think if you're an owner, wait a minute, there's only like 5 of us doing this. Like if we just all agree to pay less, we all save like $2,000 a month. Where if we all keep fucking each other over and raise it 100, we're essentially just bidding each other up. Mm-hmm. And we're the only ones going to hire these people. So what happened was a lot of owners who survived that recession, and SK was one of the few teams who did, they were all really scared by that at that point. And they were like, right, let's never let that happen again. Let's never get involved in like bidding wars for players. What we're going to do instead is we're going to find players who are like decent, maybe a player who's good, but we're going to try and get a player and hope he becomes good within our org.
Yeah.
So he just grows up in our org and we don't ever have to buy the top talent for the top dollar. Now, the problem in League of Legends is the bubble never burst. It only kept getting bigger, and it's getting bigger to this day. It still gets bigger. People get bigger and bigger salaries. There's bigger money to go if you sign for new teams. So if you're SK, this lineup they had now was their budget team. If you remember the storyline of when they made this original core lineup, when all the players left after season 3 Worlds, mm-hmm. Ocelot went out the door, Kevin went out the door, Nif went out the door. They lost everyone. Herkbot went to Nib. They literally lost the entire team except Candy Panda. They re-signed Candy Panda and they brought in all these different players. N-Rated was like washed up at that time. Mm-hmm. They gave him one last chance. Fox, they got out of, I think he was actually playing for their challenger team at the time. Svenskeren, had been a talent, but he'd been out of the scene for a while because he was viewed as like a toxic presence within teams and no one wanted to give him a try. Then Freddy122 was like a decent, stable player, but he'd never been a star. So they put together a very cheap budget team. And now maybe, hey, let's be cynical. Maybe they even thought, hey, we just do this for a season, see how it goes, get back into LCS, player split. Maybe we add players to it. It just so happened the team actually, partly because of N-Rated, had really good strategical approach. So they did really well. They finished first in the regular split that season. They made the final and finished second. Next split, they lost narrowly to Alliance in the semifinals. They made top 4. They went to Worlds. So they actually got the max value out of this team. Then they get to a period where now you bring in Forgiven. Now you're trying to build the star aspect. But the problem is, as a team, they've never gotten to the point where even though they're essentially, they were placing above the pay grade of the players. Like they shouldn't have been getting to finals, shouldn't have been getting top 4s with the kind of budget team they had. So if that comes back on you, you have 2 options. Either you do go the route of, we're going to have stars, we're going to have the best team, we're going to have to pay for the best team, or we're going to stick on this budget, in which case players who've become good and proven themselves are not going to stay on a budget team. It's like in the NBA. If you join a team, they have the initial salary rules where the first few years you play on that rookie contract where the maximum you can get something like $8 million. No one who's a star player after those 4 or 5 years says like, yeah, I'll just resign for $8 million again. They're like, I'm leaving. Like either you give me the max or I'm going somewhere else. So that's what I think's happened to SK. It's a mixture of everything's gone to shit. They weren't getting paid much anyway. So why even continue? And then for some of them, maybe their careers are over. Maybe no one wants them. So add it all in together and it is like the perfect shitstorm. Like I can't think of any other way it could go worse.
Yeah, it's I mean, like I said, as more information, kind of starts trickling out, it's ugly. I mean, I have no better
really ugly.
I have no better word for it. It just became really bad.
It seems pretty avoidable too, right? I mean, your team's doing really well. You pay them a little bit better. Is that kind of the short end of it?
I mean, That's definitely true. Here's a scenario that I've actually, because I've been an editor in chief, I've been in a lot of responsibility positions before in different companies. One of the principles I learned over years, which I think is an awesome principle, is because when they've done psychology studies into like humans and animals, there is overwhelming evidence that rewarding people for behaviors you want to encourage has better results than punishing people for behaviors you want to discourage. What you do is you essentially use like the carrot approach to reward them into the direction you want. Right. Because they're gaining things and they're getting benefits and they realize the constant positive reinforcement, they become the sorts of people, employees you want. And if they don't at that point, they probably aren't going to be somebody fit into your organization anyway. Like beating people with a stick doesn't work in this particular sense. I mean, listen, where does it work to beat people with a stick? When you have circus animals, right? And what happens with circus animals when shit goes down? They fucking snap the trainer's neck. They wreck someone, start killing people. They don't do that because they've had an awesome life. They do that because when they break, it's like, it's over, motherfucker. Like, there's no carrots bringing me back from this one. Like, that's what happens when you do that. And that's what happens to SK here. Because here's the problem. Not only did they not get rewarded for the success, they were still on the same sort of world of money, etc., despite performing above the odds with no resources, essentially. But then if you saw the story, it said that they used to get fined if they had poor performances and fined for not doing media obligation. Now, listen, the media obligation, I don't have a lot of sympathy for them. That's part of why you get a big salary in League of Legends compared to other games that are equally as skilled. But the fined for poor performance part is like, wait a minute, that's like if I pay you minimum wage and then to mop the floor, and then every time you miss a spot, I take half of it away. Or would you really be motivated to keep doing that job for? I don't think so. Because that's not it's not appropriate, right? It's like cruel and unusual punishment because you're not giving me much money for the best I do, and then if I do anything less than perfect, I get actually lose loads of my money. So I can see why these players were like, "Fuck this, I'm out of here." And now, unfortunately, that's where when you were saying before that you were saying like a negative of the open circuit is like fans would get mad that a team doesn't turn up to a tournament. Yeah. If you think that's bad, what kind of League of Legends do you think you're going to get out of a team who are literally press ganged into the arena to play a game? Because Riot is like, we will fuck you forever if you don't play this game. That's going to be the worst League of Legends you will ever witness played in a competitive server.
Oh yeah, and apparently that was, apparently Riot had come out to them and to the team because the team doesn't want to play, and apparently they were like, listen, you're playing or you're in some deep shit.
No, they came out saying that they're denying that they said that. I don't know. I'm just saying that they posted it saying that they're not forcing anyone to play, that it's up to the org. It's the org's responsibility at the end of the day.
I guess, but I mean, the things that were said make sense because I mean, the things that Riot was accused of saying was it ruins competitive balance and that they don't want to have their product be portrayed like, oh well, these games are just forfeited because they don't want that image to kind of be there, and they don't want that to be an option for teams that are getting their asses handed to them.
Sure, but there's also no evidence Riot actually said it. It was some guy commented on Reddit saying this is what Riot said.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, listen, there's never going to be. You're never going to get the full
from
story.
The actual Riot employee, which I mean is I guess the only kind of barometer we have as far as truthiness. It was never said, it's up to the org to get their players to play, and if the org can't get the players to play, then they forfeit. I mean, it's as simple as that. I don't know what happens on the punishment inside. I mean, if the org gets punished or if the players get punished. I have no idea what that's like in the rules, but I mean, I guess we'll see what shakes out in the end. I mean, this all kind of boils down to, having good player representation in the first place, right? If these players are a part of healthy, constructive contracts, then this whole situation could have been avoided. They could have negotiated a year, at a budget salary, like you said earlier, and then if they did well or if they did poorly, then you readdress things at the end of the season, like you do everywhere else. Just but we live in crazy world, so that never happens. You try and take advantage of what you can right in front of you, and then fuck all the rest.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up because that brings up a point that I've made on different occasions. Is okay, eSports is in the last few years has grown immensely, especially as a spectator sport and just as a money-making device, where now more and more organizations are dipping their hands and either getting teams or investing in teams, with either sponsorships or everything. Now you have all of these kids that are playing these games and now have opportunities to play them professionally, and they're getting locked into these shit contracts or like the Meet Your Maker situation with Corey. where you're getting put in these shit contracts and you're having your family threatened, if you don't live up to, your end of the bargain that you made that essentially they didn't live up to in the first place. Is there a need in esports now for some kind of, like other sports have players associations that protect the rights of the players, that look out for the players, their best interests, which I don't think the teams all the time have in mind. I mean, the teams want to make the most money out of these players and have the best showing, for either the least amount of money possible or, get whatever they can get out of them until they can't get that level of play out of them anymore. And then they brush them off and they find somebody who can. And is there a need in esports for some sort of an association or player representation? Like I know some people have in the past tried to start, like player management. And I mean, number one, teams aren't going to like that. And is Riot even going to like that? Where now you have these players where it's, I think it, for me, at least from my perspective, it fixes a lot of the problems they have, like with the whole poaching and tampering nonsense where you have, managers of other teams and owners of other teams talking directly to players instead of going to management. Because if I'm a manager of a team and I'm not obligated to tell my players if someone wants to, quote unquote, purchase them, that's why you have agents to do that kind of thing. You have an agent to contact and be like, okay, well, I'm interested in your player, and well, he's under contract, so they're basically the mouthpiece for the player without actually tampering with the player. Because if I'm the owner of a team, like I said, and you come to me and like, hey, you have this guy and we need him, I'm gonna tell you, well, no, fuck off, and I'm not gonna tell him, even if he's sitting the bench, like in the case of Keith McBrief was. Yeah. So what's your take on that?
I mean, it seems obvious, like, whether we need it in the sense that it's the ideal solution, I don't know, because there will be problems with even a union. You see them in sports.
Oh, yeah.
All unions have some level of corruption because, again, they become a power structure. Sure. And then once they get big enough, people within the union have their own particular things they want out of life that aren't always altruistic. But with that said, as a check and balance to the unfettered power of Riot and the teams at the moment, yes, something has to be there to push back. Because here's the thing, I think Riot definitely do not want player unions. Because think what player unions do in professional sports. Part of their main bargaining tool at the end of the day is to say, nobody will play in your league. Your league isn't going to start. You said your league was starting September 10th. It isn't. It's starting once we agree to the terms of this collective bargaining agreement. And if we don't agree to it, you might not even have a season. It might just be a season over. You lose all that money. You don't have a league. It's no point being the king of a league that doesn't start. You're not ruling over anything. So I think people like Riot definitely don't want player unions. If anything, Riot is closer aligned to the teams than they are to the players. To me, the teams, that's the key thing. The reason why Riot can always say, like, we leave things in the players' hands and that sort of thing, teams can decide for themselves, is because there's like an asterisk there, like, but we're totally in charge of all the teams. It's like, well, that's why, isn't it? The teams are the wardens of those people who keep everyone in line, and that's cell block H, and this is cell block J, and then the guy who runs the prison is Riot. So, no, unsurprisingly, they don't want all the players to then have a say over things and to be able to battle back. Because for a start off, tons of things Riot does, players would definitely stand against. Like when you have to do situations like out of nowhere, you hold an LCS play day in Europe in a country where you didn't tell anyone, and then 2 weeks later it's announced and suddenly they're moving. Players wouldn't want to do that. Almost no one would. So there's lots of scenarios where it'll just be a nightmare for Riot. But I do think it would iron a few of the problems at the moment where players definitely get fucked. Like it's totally unethical, the idea that someone can be offering you a raise when your contract has finished, but your guy has to, your current manager has to inform you, like, hey, there's a way better offer. Would you like to go and take it? Or he can choose to just go, I think I'll just won't tell them about that. Like, that's so fucked. Again, that's so un-American. Like, what country is Riot actually based in? Are they going to buy, like, a piece of Antarctica one day and move all the LCS there and just set up their own, like, Newfoundland of Riot or something? What's going on here? Do they actually understand any of the concepts of America? Like, why it's like so.
That? Which is funny because when we had Richard on, he made us go to Mark Merrill's Tumblr account. And it's like
that he wrote when he was in college.
Yeah, Merrill's musings, and it's all these like things with like Colin Powell and like Gandhi, and it's like, the whole like thought process that we're putting together here makes no sense when you put it to that. It's like, well, this is stupid and ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous.
It seems ridiculous. I guess the next step is how how does one start a players association, right?
Well, someone
you have
has to
get-
step. I mean, a player, a high-profile player, would
Yeah.
essentially have to kind of be the first man to sort of draw the line in the sand. You know, you can't have Maple Street, say I'm going to be the first person to be represented, and then crickets chirp, and you feel bad for him because you'll need somebody big or a whole team to sit there and say, look, we're sick of this, and there needs to be changes, otherwise we're not going to play.
Right.
Problem is, I don't think that will ever happen, though.
Exactly.
Because the average age, I don't know what the actual average age is, but if I had to guess what the average age of an NALCS pro is, I'd say 19.
Easily, yeah.
You've got a few vets, but most of the players are 17, 18. And so I think overall the skew would be like 19.
Yeah.
Well, the majority of the Players Association presidents and stuff in real sports are like 38, or even if they're an active player, they're 35. And in fact, actually, consistently, when they vote for those presidents, the players, all of the players, vote for the older players, and they purposely vote for the veteran guy. Now, there is nobody in esports who was a player who's going to be 36. At most, they're going to be like 25. And so even
the oldest one is like St. Vicious.
Yeah, they're not going to have much business experience. They're going to know much about all this sort of thing. Also, a lot of that, if you realize in player unions, is active players. Like in tennis, they vote like Federer, the president of the players union, because he's an active player, but he's been around the longest time. He's high profile enough to have a voice, but he's also going to know enough about the thing. Like, again, if it's an active player, that's going to be someone who's 19 or 20. So that's not going to work in itself. So the big problem here is, the main reason I think why no one will ever sign with a union is because, okay, so the one player we have, if let's say we go into the NBA one, okay, when the NBA had their last collective bargaining agreement, one of the main people who actually pushed it to get signed earlier when the players were holding out for more was actually Kobe Bryant, who at the time was one of the best players, but he was on the back end of his career. And people said cynically that he did it because, he only has a few years left. He wanted to play another season. He didn't want to have another season off. But the key thing is, because he was like one of the stars, like he was probably one of the biggest names, the top 2 or 3, you had to have him on board within your union. Otherwise, it immediately loses some of its power. So let's say we start an NALCS player union. First player we have to have is Bjergsen.
Yeah.
If we don't have Bjergsen, the whole thing is a waste of time.
Yes.
Now, how are we possibly going to get Bjergsen when Bjergsen is so balls deep in TSM that he's signing contracts years down the line? Like, isn't his contract till like 2018 or something?
I think something
So he's
like
already
that,
he's bought and paid for already. It's over.
Oh, yeah.
He's not joining our union.
No.
He's not going to be a head person in our union. He's not going to rebel against TSM. He's not going to rebel against Riot. Unfortunately, the people you need to start this thing that can give it some legitimacy, they're the ones you'll never get. You can probably only get the guy who's being fucked over at the moment in like SK or who wants to leave Copenhagen Wolves because he's disgruntled. You're never going to get the main guy I think you need to start it out with, which you need the stars, I think. If you have the 5 biggest stars, you got something to start with.
No, absolutely. And I 100% agree with you. As I was talking with one of my friends about this not that long ago, and I said the only way that it would work is if, again, like you said, you need a poster boy, someone that the rest of the players are like, oh, you know what? If he does it, that makes sense because, he's the best player here. We should follow what he does. You need an example player. And like you said, a guy who's sour grapes, disgruntled on a shit team who steps over, the rest of the players, again, who are just kids would be like, oh, well, he's just pissed because he doesn't have as good a deal as I do and he's on a crappy team. So what's, of course, why he wants to do this. I have an awesome deal and an awesome contract. My team's always in first place. I don't need to change anything. Everything should be status quo. But ultimately, I mean, I don't know the verbiage of any of these contracts. I haven't seen them. I'm assuming some of them are filled with just absolute nonsense.
The majority of those contracts would not hold up in court.
Yeah.
I've spoken to multiple people who are literally lawyers, law students, people from, and key thing is different regions as well, because even though a lot of the LCS contracts are in California, I've spoken to people in America, in Europe, totally different backgrounds. All of them, the one thing they can agree upon is when they see these contracts, they're like, this can't be real. There's no way this could be like a business if this is the contract. Because most of the contracts is literally just boilerplate downloaded off the internet off like example contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lawyer didn't even write these up. That's why what's funny is sometimes you get a naive person who comes into esports, right, who's had a real job before, and they get offered a contract for something very simple, like be a writer at a website. And they'll see some of the conditions, like we own every likeness and right to all of your work. If you don't provide every single aspect that we ask for, we can deny all your salary. And they're like, I'd never sign a contract to this. Like, why would I let them fuck me? And you have to say, no, dude, you have to realize they don't know that stuff's in there. They don't mean that. They're never going to enforce all that stuff. They've just literally got downloaded whatever generic contract was for something online, and even they aren't going to uphold that stuff. So, but that's not a good world to be in. In theory, the contract should be specific to the game with all the rules outlined in it. And so I'll give you an example of a rule which has never been fully publicized enough, but that is so corrupt it's unreal. So one of the reasons why Dignitas bought out one of the reasons why CLG poached Zion Spartan and Skara after the fact, seasons later, is because they were originally one of the teams trying to get Zion Spartan and Shifter when Coast got relegated. They wanted to get them at that point, but instead they went to Dignitas and they were signed away and it was all done above board and all the rest of it. But one of the reasons why CLG couldn't get them and why it was a back and forth thing, it wasn't just as simple like, hey, can we have your players? Come join us. Here's the money. Is because the amount of money asked for was so ridiculous for these players. Like, it was an amount of money where you're not even in a leverage position. You've just been relegated. Like, you're not going to use those players and get enough value out of them if you keep them. But if you're getting a decent amount, you should let them go. And they don't want to play for you anymore. So every aspect tells you it should have been an easy deal. Yeah. It wasn't, because the person who was doing it had a buyout clause that was insane. Now, this is how unethical this is. The contract said, while you play for Coast, you have to play for the whole duration of the contract. So the contract lasted a year, right? So you had to play for the summer split. But we're not in LCS, and so since we're not in LCS, when you're not in LCS, we're not required to pay you salary. But there's a buyout clause that's huge, right? That is not legal, right? In law, you cannot have someone under a contract where they're not getting compensated for their work, but they have to work for you and they can't go anywhere else. No. Like, that's actually unethical. It's like there's literally the term compensation. You have to receive something for your work. And in most cases, let's face it, there has to be like minimum wage. It has to be certain things that you get in exchange for it. And if the opportunities are really good elsewhere, obviously it has to be appropriate to that. So what's funny is if the players weren't 19-year-old kids and they'd gone to this lawyer person I did, the lawyer person would have just told them what I did, which is, I'll just walk from that contract. You'll never take you to court. It would never hold up in court. It would never even become a court case. Someone would see that and go, oh, that's not even legal. And you'd be free from the court. You wouldn't even have to pay the buyout, actually. That's the funny thing. You don't even have to get the team to play it. You can just leave. But all the players were like, no, but I have a contract and it says I have to play for 1 year. It's like that's irrelevant, mate. So unfortunately, that's part of the problem. These contracts are so fucked. But first of all, here's the genius of it. The org doesn't actually know that what they're doing is not legal. The player doesn't know it's not legal. And so as a result, both people are adhering to contracts that shouldn't even hold up. But again, it's funny how Riot, who's a massive company making millions of dollars, who have access to lawyers, they're not having people check these contracts. They're not having people make these contracts fair. I thought they cared about player welfare. What's all going on here, guys? Wouldn't you want a player to have a fair contract that didn't like force him into indentured servitude when he gets relegated, where he doesn't get any salary for split? Nah, apparently not. Apparently that's not a concern.
It all just seems kind of like almost willful ignorance, right? Like the intent is to make everyone happy and make everything good. But with zero follow through and zero actual scruples. I don't know if that's actually the right word or not. But there's just,
I like it.
They're not pursuing the avenues they should be pursuing to actually help players or even organizations along. They're just like, let me go to Office Depot. I'll get a contract, and this is what we'll sign. That'll be fine. That's okay, right?
Anyone argue with me?
That's fine, and it's great. And there's no problem. Then if no one's saying that this is not okay, then it's just okay. That's apparently the world that they're living in.
Well, the problem is you dangle money in front of these kids, and you dangle, hey, listen, you're gonna live in, we're gonna put you up in a house, and you can eat all the Chipotle you want, and we're gonna give you computers. It's and then they get bought in because it's like, you're right, this is amazing, and then they don't care what they sign. What you're gonna put a lien on my house? Cool, whatever. I don't care. I don't own my house. It's just nonsense, and these kids don't understand it because they're kids.
The kind of weird thing is that even though they're signing the contract, like you said earlier, they don't have any weight. The kids still have the power, right? Yeah. They could legitimately walk away from everything totally scratch free, and then they'd be fine. There's literally zero repercussions that can happen to some of these people, and they're not taking advantage of it. There's so much. It seems like room for players to take advantage of their situation, then they're just not.
I guess that's the key thing. Yeah. It's like that movie, A Bug's Life. Like, the ants will never rebel if they don't know that they have the overwhelming force and they can easily defeat these grasshoppers and just go away with it. So as long as they don't know, then you're in complete control of them, which is what you see with all these players.
Mm-hmm. How can they?
What's funny is some of these players now in these scenarios. That's another funny thing is. there wouldn't even need to be poaching if some of these players knew these rules. The player could just
Yeah.
be like, I don't want to play for you this split. See, I'm off.
I'm leaving.
And then
Goodbye.
that's it. It's over.
Yeah, I think right now the only thing that's going on is that one super vague clause that like LCS players have to adhere to all of Riot's rules. Like that one little bullet point does give Riot overarching authority over what goes on. Again, not gonna be held if you were to sue or anything, but I guess it does kind of makes people's buttholes tighten up just a little bit. And they're like, maybe I don't want to do that. So I kind of see where some of these players are scared and where some of the orgs are scared, but at the same time, why not just do it, right? Especially if you're a smaller team, like if in the Co situation, like with Zion, surely, I mean, this is his career. Surely he had to Google what is actually contractually, what am I obligated for?
None of those players do that.
That's what I'm saying, and that's insane to me that you don't take the time to be like, you know what, maybe I should learn something about before I sign my name to this ridiculous that I barely understand. Let me mail,
TV lawyers.
Let me mail this to Uncle Eric, my lawyer, or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Unfortunately, the public perception about the way law works is that
it's all CSI.
They think it's all like black and white, that it's all figured out. So they think if a contract says something, that must be the case. You have to realize most cases, the reason why you have a jury and you have people arguing the cases is they're not in any way black and white. That's why it's always based on precedents before to try and sway the judge. Like, well, if this was the case that came before, I can make this argument. It's because actually it's very hard to interpret a lot of the legal stuff. Secondly, you're in a situation where most of these people don't know anything about law. And more importantly, we've all heard this notion that law is really expensive. So actually, if I didn't know this, I would naively think, oh, well, the reason why I'm not going to even pursue this is because it'll cost me like $30,000 to even start it up. Well, it actually turns out to get a lawyer to check the contract. First of all, you can get law students who'll do it for free.
Yeah.
And if you want literally a real lawyer, he might do it for like $100. Just look over a quick contract, take him 2 hours, and they'll tell you, oh, no, this will hold up. $200 when we're talking about buyout fees of 5 figures and more is nothing. It actually would be worth the player's time. But again, the player doesn't understand this. That's why if Riot really want to sell themselves as this altruistic force, where is this special lawyer that they have on retainer who's like a player liaison lawyer who'll look over stuff and tell you, like, for your own welfare, is this like a good deal for you? Could you maybe do this different? That guy doesn't exist.
No, they don't, and they don't want him to exist. Frankly, is the way it feels. I mean, that would throw a monkey wrench in their abilities to control the players and to kind of be, with their teams, be like, okay, look, this is how things are going to run. And as long as you can keep your players in line, then we don't have to worry about things because, no one's going out and making, no one's questioning whether or not this stuff is ethical or if I break any of these quote unquote rules in my contract, what's going to happen to me? Every one of these kids is probably simply afraid that if they do something and they step out of line, that, that their dream is over and they're no longer going to be on an LCS team and they're not going to play League for, their career for the next, 19 months is going to be, playing League.
That also strikes me as kind of weird because as a 19-year-old, I mean, I was always totally okay saying no to something because I'm 19. I have literally the rest of my life to recover from a mistake that I made when I was 19. As long as I don't like murder someone or become a felon, I'm probably gonna be okay.
You have to remember that a lot of these kids, and I can't speak for a lot of the other games, but I know a lot of the kids that play League of Legends that are at that high level. They're very introverted. They're not. I mean,
okay, the texture manager.
I'm just saying, but they're not the type of people to question that kind of stuff because of that they're
hotshot. Fuck you, I'm not practicing this week.
they're not that guy. They're either was very shy, grew up, just playing games all the time, only had a handful of friends at most, they're not the loud, boisterous personalities, where as your traditional athletes, your baseball, basketball, football, soccer players, those people, when they go on to the next level and they get closer to the, the sports thing, you're expected to kind of be the, the quote unquote, the real deal there. You know what I mean? And the bigger the personality in most cases, the bigger the paycheck. Whereas in League, these kids are, like, I don't want to say thankful for the opportunity they get, but like, this is their dream, and they're working their hardest to not screw it up. And if that means then they're going to sign their name and this is the contract and this is fine. And, I don't want to have somebody, a lawyer look at it because I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to be the first person to, be like, well, this contract doesn't look right. What does this mean here? You know what I mean? They don't, they're like white knuckling it because like, this is my opportunity. This is my opportunity. So they're gripping it as hard as humanly possible.
When really they should be letting their agent grip it as hard as humanly possible.
Let
But
the-
there's not a whole lot of player agents for esports. I think there was it's Andrew Garfield. There's one.
Well, think
He's
about
got-
how crazy that is in itself. So essentially, the team is the agent of the player. I wonder
Yeah.
whose benefit he's going to be in. Like, how does Bjergsen, a guy making, let's face it, it might
A
be at
lot.
this point like 500,000 a year or something ridiculous, when you add everything in. How is someone making $500,000 a year in an entertainment industry not have an agent? There's like dog shit actors that work, you've seen in Hollywood movies, who walk into Starbucks in the background and get a coffee, who make $20,000 in a year, who have an agent who's looking out for their welfare, trying to get them better gigs all the time, and also there's agents that they'll move up onto better agents when they get more money. How does Bjergsen not have an agent?
Well, that's like, and that's it. Especially when
Weird.
especially when there's so much involved with, with sponsorships and stuff. The fact that you don't think, what I mean, even if you say, okay, these kids don't know better, but watch TV. I mean, let's be fair. When they're not playing, league or eating, they're probably just chilling, watching TV. I mean, to
Yeah,
have,
but they watch anime, mate. So they're not gonna. They're only
Yeah,
gonna learn
they
about how
don't
to
know.
battle demons and how to
only-
be sexually awkward. Like they're not gonna learn anything about law there. I guess if they play that game like Phoenix Wright Attorney
Yeah,
at
the
Law, they
Phoenix
might
Wright
have-
Attorney
that
at
might
Law.
help
That's
them.
the
Let's
key,
get me a Game Boy and get Bjergsen on the phone. I've got the way out.
this is what we're gonna do. We're just gonna mail all the teams' Game
Phoenix
Boys
Wright.
loaded with
It'll
Phoenix
destroy the
Wrights.
whole scene from inside. That will be the virus that will spread.
That's how we attack it from the inside. We just mail a shitload of Game Boys loaded with Phoenix Wright. People go, oh my god, this whole time I never knew.
I think the most disturbing part is if they're this casual with their career decisions and contract decisions, what do their taxes look like? You think any of these guys got an accountant? That's got to be, all these people are going to get audited. It's going to be a nightmare for them. Surely. You
Well,
got
especially-
$50,000 from what?
If you think that's bad, think about the craziest example. If League lasts long enough, this will happen, okay?
Yeah.
So in Europe especially, because Europe's not like North America, where in theory the standard of living across America is almost the same, no matter where you come from, okay? But you have to realize in Europe, you have literally countries which have drastically different GDPs who are all earning the same salary. So that means there will be players. Okay, so if you go to countries like Belarus, Ukraine, the average salary from a man who works, like a 25-year-old man, is $200 a month. Now, if you're an LCS player and you're from Poland, from Belarus, from Ukraine, Russia, something like that, and you would make something along those lines if you were at home. But now in LCS, you make whatever, $1,000 a week, whatever the term is, your riot salary and your team salary. You're now making 5 times your normal salary. Let's say you play for a year and you make that much money, but you don't declare it on your taxes, and then you get audited 5 years down the road. How would you even earn the money to pay that back? You're now
There's
earning
no
a
way.
fifth as much. You actually are totally fucked. You're like the MC Hammer type guy who makes the millions and billions, and now when you then get the audit bill, when they finally go look into it, you don't even have the earning power to make that anymore. You're totally fucked.
Yep. So I think our solo queue advice for this week has been hire an agent, hire an accountant, and put money away in savings to pay taxes, because I'm sure you're probably not doing it right now.
Basically, you need that like Better Call Saul guy. That guy needs to be in
Yeah.
every single aspect of League of Legends esports. Even fucking teams over. Like, listen, you can totally walk on this contract. Fuck that host guy. He's an asshole anyway.
I think that's what
Still the other fucking-
esports law is going to do. I think esports law is slowly going to become Saul.
Better Call Saul.
Yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to watch that develop.
That's started here.
Yeah.
It's just the whole thing, and it's funny that there isn't some kind of a lawyer or an agency that doesn't reach out to one of these players just as like a feeler, just to be like, hey, look, listen, nobody else has an agent, and you're Bjergsen. Like, let me appeal to your better nature. It's like, look, you're probably the most marketable guy in North America in League of Legends, and you're making how much money? I can assure you, I will make you more money than that. Sign with my agency, and let me take a look at this contract. This is bullshit. You know what I mean? It's like, and I feel like sometimes that these players are almost like too naive with that stuff, and
They're willfully ignorant.
Yeah, and they don't. And it's not that they don't want to, they don't want to better deal themselves.
No, they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them.
Exactly. That they're like I said, they're worried that what's going to happen if they do try and quote unquote reach for that brass ring, and say, well, you're right. You know what, if this guy says I can make more money, and I'm selling myself short here. Why wouldn't I do that? And that's how it would start. Not necessarily a players union, but just player representation, where you'd have somebody looking out for your best interests because your best interests mean their best interests.
That's the problem, though. Like I say, because the players still don't know they're being fucked, they don't know that there's a need for it.
Yeah.
So it would almost seem unnecessary if a lawyer even contacted them. You
Yeah.
know, like you have to realize Bjergsen was like 17 in 2013. That's when he was allowed to start playing. So basically, Bjergsen was in the phase where he's supposed to be like, "Hey, I've heard of a band called AC/DC," and that's when he's supposed to make like whole decisions on his whole career. Like, who? Wow, this Stiff Little Fingers band sure sound a lot like Green Day. I wonder if I'll check out their second CD. Instead, it's like, "Oh, come with us, son. You're coming to America to start a whole career." It's like he just has to trust whoever's in front of him, doesn't he?
No, I know. It's that's like I say, that's what's crazy, and that's why for the teams and for Riot, they don't really have to worry about that because again, they're just dealing with children. It's very easy to manipulate.
So essentially, we've also got to the end that Riot also exploits child labor.
Yes.
So
Child labor,
communists,
communism, fascism.
anti-American.
Yeah.
Basically, if Thomas Jefferson were alive today,
he would
he would probably have a civil war against Riot. So imagine a red Confederate flag, but with Riot's logo on. I'm setting the scene for you here, guys. Okay.
I love it. I
Stars
love
and
it.
fist.
I love
Nick
it.
Allen is John Wilkes Booth.
Oh my God.
This is
Who's
all,
Robert E. Lee in this scenario? I don't know.
It's all.
There's no one with that. I think when John Wilkes Booth, no one knows what his actual character was. He just shot someone and was a scumbag. But the problem is, anyone that has character, again, wrong show, mate. This is a very bland sort of accountant, middle management world. There's no Steve Jobs within Riot's world.
No,
Weird.
No.
It's good.
It's just grabbing. I mean, it's just grabbing the dollars and I mean, it sounds mean to see.
You're in that like money fan machine that's on Price is Right or whatever, and all these dollar bills are flying around. You just got to grab them.
And it only costs them
Yeah.
what do the players make? 35,000 for like a split,
Something like
a
that.
year or something
For a
it comes
split?
out to.
Is it a year or is it split? I think it's split.
Whatever it works out to. I mean,
Yeah.
for what? For them to have complete stranglehold over the entire operation,
Yeah.
basically. And I mean, and it's kind of like the same situation with like the NFL, where everyone feels that the commissioner, Roger Goodell, is he's just in bed with all of the owners, and ultimately it's his job to make sure that the owners are happy, and whether the players are happy doesn't make a difference because they're not necessarily the ones that are holding all of the money chips. It is, but it's just it's just that whole thing with the agency and then the representation that just bothers me because it feels like it's something that like you learn, like eSports wants to be legit, and League of Legends and Riot and all those things, well, they want to be considered, it started with the whole
Mainstream.
them getting athlete visas, now they're getting played on ESPN and that whole thing, and they want to be considered real and a legit sport, and it just seemed like the complete obvious thing is like you learn from what other leagues and what other stuff is done before you, so you don't make those stupid mistakes that they all did, when they were first starting, 100 years ago. But it's not, because the reason those mistakes were made is because the players learned on their own, and they're like, okay, well, we need to fix this because we're all getting fucked. Whereas like in sports, before free agency was the thing, you were basically owned by your team and you couldn't go anywhere, and whatever they wanted to pay you, they paid you, and it was like, well, too fucking bad. You're ours. You're essentially the same thing as an end table. I own you. And, that's basically what these players think that think kind of what it is and what it sort of is because they're too afraid to walk away from it. So I don't know. It irks
Spooky stuff going on.
It irks me because I don't.
Maybe something will happen with this SK uproar, and then players will start to look at the things that they signed before they signed them.
Let's be fair; it'll get brushed. It'll get brushed aside as
probably
and be forgotten. In 2 weeks, and
Well, because Aframu is gonna cut his finger on a basketball goal, and then we got something new to talk about.
Well, plus the problem is these issues only manifest when everything goes wrong for the players. That's when they were willing to rebel. It's the last stage.
Oh, yeah.
So unfortunately, the community doesn't give a shit if some player who's doing really badly is having a bad time in all the other aspects. Again, people in general are just like, it's not just esports. People in general, the biggest problem in the world is not that people don't have like moral imperatives and that they don't think certain philosophies, is that they don't act on them. So if it's someone you don't like, you don't care about, you don't give a fuck. You don't stand up for them. You don't speak out for them. You don't say this is wrong. You just go, who cares? He's a loser anyway. Now, if Bjergsen has some problem, people will cry themselves to sleep over that. Like, they'll start cut for Bjergsen if he has some issues going on there. But no one gives a flying fuck what happens to Sven Skaren or whatever.
No, and and
That sucks.
that's I mean, sucks for Sven Skaren. And it's weird for Bjergsen, I guess. People are cutting themselves for him.
Passionate TSM fans.
Well, I mean, those are TSM fans, so I'm not actually against that entirely. If you want to show solidarity, guys, just whatever way you choose,
Yeah, some people chant their name, other people cut their arm. Got to get that sweet TSM scar.
The TSM.
Big circle.
The TSM
great.
fan. The TSM fan. If they're anything but passionate. Fair weather, I think, is the best.
Fair weather. Pretty good. I don't know how we're doing on time. I think we're starting to run a little bit long here based on what we're doing. So because you're in the future and you have all this future knowledge ahead of us, do you have any quick fantasy LCS picks for us? Any idea on where we should go? I got a big week ahead of me, kind of important. Any ideas? Any sleepers that I'm going to be missing? I don't know.
Let me have a quick look at who plays.
Yeah. Right now, my roster's pretty solid, but I'm kind of shaky on the team. Maybe the top laner.
That's because your team is currently SK Gaming.
No, it's H2K.
Oh,
now.
You got rid of that.
Yeah.
Which one do you want, NA or Europe?
It's the same fantasy. So whoever's going to generate the most points, essentially, is kind of the goal.
Right. Well, in NA, I would probably go with if I'm looking at the matchup six, it's obviously who you play is going to be depending on how many points you get.
Right.
I think the big ones here are.
Bob's got the roster up already. He's looking to make the trade as soon as you say it.
Right, well, Liquid plays NME in a game, and they play CLG. And bearing in mind, CLG has quite a poor record against teams that are above them, and NME is very likely to get beaten by Liquid. And Liquid already has some players who do quite well in fantasy anyway. The most obvious one's Piglet. Yeah. That would be an obvious one there. Piglet and Phoenix would be two pretty obvious ones, I think, that you'd get a lot of points out of. Elsewhere, we've got... I'll have a look in Europe. The thing in Europe, usually as a general rule of thumb, is that actually Fnatic aren't as great as they might seem, because the problem with Fnatic is they win the games too convincingly in a lot of situations.
Yeah,
so the real team you want in Europe is always Origin. You want to see when Origin's playing teams they're going to beat, and then you want to go for them because they get crazy points. They just skirmish all the time. So Origin this week...
Fnatic.
Well, that's the thing. This week they play Gambit and SK. So I'd be going to all the Origin players. So you want Niels, you want I think Expeke as well. Yeah. Those are two obvious ones. Those are one and Amazing. Those are the three ones from Origin that you want to, if you can play them. Any of those three is good. And Niels and Amazing, I think, are the ones who get the most fantasy points in general. So those two are pretty much locks.
Got to get that. You guys heard it here. That's the ones.
Those are your picks. And, don't listen to me on any picks because my team sucks.
Oh boy, did you stink it up this year?
I listened since I started doing the single game ones. I have been crushing it. It's because I can choose my team every week, and that's now. And all of a sudden, I apparently know what I'm talking about. When the full season one that Riot does, I blow at.
Yeah,
I picked my team. I might as well just flush that team down the toilet. So
have you won any money from Vulcan yet? Like
yes.
Any actual money? Yeah.
I mean, not like
no.
It's not enough
Vulcan
I can
coins.
retire on. The 18 cents that I might be walking away with isn't exactly. I'm not mortgaging my daughter's college fund yet, but
one day. Professional eSports gambler.
Listen, for the record, my wins to my losses in terms of the league, I'm far ahead. I mean, I'm like the Jimmy the Greek of the fantasy, fantasy League of Legends going. I'm picking winners all over the place.
Nice. Okay. Well, let's start to wrap up the show. Thorin, do you have anything that you need to say to close out?
No.
End
of the show.
See ya. End of the show. That's great. Follow him on YouTube, Twitter if you don't already. I'm sure all of our viewers do. You can follow us YouTube. We are Tower Dive. You can follow us on Twitter at Tower Dive PC. Follow us on Twitch at Tower Dive PC. Everything is essentially Tower Dive PC. If you ever want to interact with us, feel free to tweet us, comment on any of our videos, comment on any of our streams. Thorin, thank you so much for coming onto our show. It has truly been a pleasure. I've been a pretty big fan of yours for a little while now, and meeting you and these other personalities has been just an amazing opportunity. So from the bottom of our hearts at Tower Dive, thank you for coming on. Great conversation.
Yeah, it's definitely been a blast.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't have said it any better. Yeah, other than that, thanks everyone for joining us on chat and everyone that's listening on stream and whatever. This will be up on YouTube, as he already gave the the links. And that about wraps it up for us. So for myself, Captain Hooks, my man,
Panda Man,
and Thorin, Duncan Shields, thank you again, and we will see you on the Rift.
bye-bye.